Good morning, everyone. We just want to check and make sure we can be heard in the Zoom webinar.
Yes, Sam, you're coming through loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Chair Pyska, we are ready to begin when you are.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the January 24th meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We will start by calling this meeting to order and a moment of silence. We've had 3 mass shootings in California in the last 3 days, starting with shooting in Monterey Park, the one in Oakland, and then last night in Half Moon Bay. And as we hear about these shootings almost daily throughout the country, they are each unique and impact those communities in completely different ways. And just want to send our hearts to those communities and those individuals and families affected. And I don't know if anyone else has moments of silence. Do you? Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, this one hits close to the city of Clear Lake. 2 individuals just learned, an ex-employee, a longtime employee also of the city of Clear Lake, Julie Burrows, just passed away. She used to work in the planning department, lived in the city of Clear Lake for a long time as well, helped to get a lot of projects completed, was a wonderful human being and will be missed. I know she dealt with some health issues upon retiring from the city of Clear Lake, and unfortunately just received news that she passed away over the weekend. And also Robert Viramontes, who was working in public works for the city of Clear Lake, had a car incident and unfortunately lost his life, leaving his wife behind and his son as well. Want to keep them in our thoughts, and just want to add an extra point. And I don't know what the circumstances of the driving incident was for him specifically, but just a call to the community. Leave early, slow down, give space between cars, drive for the weather, not for your destination. We're all on the same roads together. We all want to reach our destination together. Please be mindful of how you drive and how you impact others around you. We're all seeing it, and I know that those listening are more likely to want to do these things right versus those not listening. But do the right things out there. Lead by example. We're all sharing the road, and we all need to be safe out there.
So, Chief Tuberville, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any extra items for consideration? No? Anyone? Okay, we'll move on to approval of the consent agenda. We have items that need to be pulled or considered. We have 5.6 will be pulled for discussion later today. And then
5.6 will be for a further meeting.
Okay. It says later today on my note.
I would like to pull it for a further meeting date. I know that Community Development will be meeting with our Auditor Controller to discuss this and review it to ensure that what's brought to us is correct.
I'll let her know.
Okay.
Okay. Is that it?
And then 5.8.
For later today?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone in the public wish to pull an item on the consent agenda? Then we'll bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, I move to approve consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.5, 5.7, and 5.9 to 513.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Then we'll be moving on to our 9.6 item, public input. Members of the public can come up and speak for 3 minutes.
Good morning, Board. Scott DeLeon, Public Works and Water Resources Director. Mindful of your busy schedule today, I just want to take a moment to introduce you to our new right-of-way agent, Mr. Aaron Brent. Aaron comes to us via Utah, so we're very excited to have him here in California. Aaron brings over 30 years of experience in right-of-way acquisition and appraisal, real estate. So we're very excited to have him. We have him already busy on many projects, and he has definitely been thrown into the fire. So just wanted to take a minute to introduce you to Aaron, and thank you for your time.
Very exciting.
Thank you and welcome. Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public in the boardroom or in the Zoom room?
I see no hands in the Zoom room. Oh, there is a hand that popped up, Lori Montserrat.
Okay, Lori Montserrat, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, just a point of order. Is this the meeting at which you will be discussing the Clear Lake hitch? I didn't see an afternoon meeting listed on the public calendar, and so I came this morning.
Yes, that item will begin at 1:30 p.m.
Thank you very much.
No further hands.
Okay. We have 2 minutes until our next item. Is there anything from our non-timed item that we can do quickly? Or should we wait 2 minutes?
7.5.
7.5?
Yeah, it'd probably be quick.
Okay. 7.5, consideration of update and appointment to the 2023 committee assignments for the members of the Board of Supervisors. This is from the clerk.
Sorry, getting all together here. As submitted after our last meeting, the revised and updated committee assignments for your review and consideration.
Comments from the board? This is to remove the Cannabis Tax Committee, CDD Ad Hoc Committee, Economic Development Task Force, South Main Street Negotiating Team. Remove those from our ad hoc committees. And it looks like we need a member for the
Law Library.
law library.
Yeah, when I was at the
Supervisors.
meeting with the, go ahead, you go first.
No, go for it.
When I was at the law library meeting, they had stated that the chair of the board is commonly the attendee of the Board of Trustees, or a designee. So yeah, that's what they notified me, so I wanted to make sure that we addressed it.
And when do they meet?
Thursday, it's the third Thursday of the month, at noon, so that the judges can be there during their lunch break.
Okay. Supervisor Sabatier?
And if that is a rule, that rule has not been followed very, I don't know if Supervisor Simon was on that committee when he was the chair. I know I wasn't. I believe Tina Scott was the entire time. But I wanted to make sure with you, Chair, because your name popped up on CSAC Board of Directors. I did not want to jump off CSAC and just wanted to make sure that I didn't misunderstand our prior conversation. So that's been exchanged back to being myself and Supervisor Green as the alternate.
I was going to be the alternate.
Okay, maybe that's where that change should have occurred. Okay.
Yeah.
But other than that, I whether you want to take on the role for Law Library or keep it with Supervisor Crandall, that's up to you guys.
I don't mind.
I enjoy them. I do. It's
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for each of us to take a turn there. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, public input on this item, the chambers or on Zoom.
Nothing on Zoom.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for some action.
let's see.
Madam Chair, I move to approve with the changes made verbally to the CSAC Board of Directors with Supervisor Sabatier, myself, and Supervisor Chair Pyska as the alternate, and then changing Chair Pyska to being the committee member for the Law Library.
And
And
deleting.
And deleting the committees as stated in the presentation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes, and now we can move forward with our 6.2 item, presentation of proclamation commending Tina Dawn Rubin for her 22 years of service to the County of Lake Board of Supervisors. Tina, you want to come meet me up here?
All the way.
Okay, Board of Supervisors, County of Lake, State of California, proclamation commending Tina Dawn Rubin for her 22 years of service to the County of Lake. Whereas Tina Dawn Rubin has been an employee of the County of Lake since June 4th, 2001, when she was hired as a part-time assistant for both the Health Services, Mental Health, and Environmental Health departments. Whereas in 2016, Tina accepted a full-time role in environmental health as an environmental health aide, during which time she took on the technically challenging consumer protection program on top of the many other programs in which she worked. Tina's exemplary work ethic served her well as she provided the public-facing presence to nearly every restaurant operator, temporary event sponsor, tattoo facility, and caterer in Lake County for over 2 decades. Whereas Tina's depth of knowledge and steadfast dedication in consumer protection has been a source of reliable knowledge for both the environmental health staff as well as the public at large. Whereas Tina's most outstanding contribution to the community was found in her tireless dedication to serving as the point of contact for environmental health to answer questions and provide guidance for community members affected by the Rocky Fire, Valley Fire, Clayton Fire, Sulphur Bank Fire, Mendocino Complex, and LNU Lightning Fire. Whereas Tina does not recognize the category of classic rock because true rock and roll is timeless and never dies. Whereas by her professional ability and selfless dedication to duty, Tina Rubin reflects great credit upon herself and were in keeping with the highest standards of public service. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Lake does hereby express its sincere appreciation and gratitude to Tina Dawn Rubin for her years of dedicated service to the residents of the county and wishes her the very best in retirement. Adopted this 24th day of January 2023. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my service with the county and especially with the Division of Environmental Health. It's been rewarding.
We are incredibly grateful for your many years of service. And is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Come on up.
Hi, Craig Weatherby, Environmental Health Director. I haven't been the director for very long, been there for 2 years. However, I've been working with Tina since I started. And yes, she yelled at me on my day one because apparently you don't talk about rock and roll unless you're going to talk about rock and roll with respect. Tina, you mean everything to the Environmental Health Office. We don't do what we do without you. We're going to miss you. There will be no replacing Tina Dawn Rubin. We may find somebody to sit in that chair, but it won't be Tina. So we love you. We wish you the very, very best. And on your actual day of retirement, I am going to torture you all day long. I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, board members?
Tina, you and I met before I ever started in public office. I am so sorry. You were very patient with me. I had no idea what I was doing, but you walked me through every step on putting events together. I know that you worked very well with my personal timelines, which were not the timelines I was supposed to abide to. I appreciate you. You allowed me to make things happen for the community I served in a community capacity, and you have been serving that position in environmental health for many, many years, and appreciate the fact that you've been able to do that. So thank you so much. I wish you the best.
Thank you, Bruno.
Yeah.
And do we have anybody in the chambers or on Zoom that would like to speak? Okay, well, we'll close it then, and thank you for your service and congratulations. We wish you lots of great years in your retirement. Whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, we got to do a picture.
No, rock and roll pose, what do you want?
There you go. Thank you.
I didn't like you.
All my chairs make all the noises.
Okay, next is our 9:15 item, public hearing, fire hazard severity zone maps presented by CAL FIRE. And you can come up and join us here. You can come up here.
Is it there?
Yeah.
But good morning, my name is Marshall Thurville, I'm the battalion chief of CAL FIRE.
Oh, they
Oh,
need you
hold
to
on.
have the mic, yeah, so.
About now. So good morning, my name is Marshall Thurville, I'm battalion chief in the Sonoma Lake Napa unit, which covers Lake County. I'm here to talk about the fire hazard severity zone. And what we're doing is a public hearing as part of a government process at the state level to get public input. So the county has been very fortunate to work with us. We feel very fortunate and hold this public hearing as part of a Board of Supervisors meeting. So we're not asking for any action from the Board of Supervisors or county staff. This is strictly a state process to get public comment, official public comment on the proposed new fire hazard severity zone maps. And that's printed on the back table back there laying down. There was in the board agenda packet a couple forms and things that we're assuming everybody, CAL FIRE is assuming that you're prepared to comment on. So I'm not going to give a description of the proposed changes, description of what the maps are intended to be used for. We're making the assumption you're ready to give a public comment. So it's 3-minute limited public, or 3-minute time public comment. We'll have you come up to the podium here and I'll put the microphone, CAL FIRE's recording this as well as I believe the county is, to get your guys' comment on the proposed changes. So you can comment on the regulation, comment on the map changes, and then once we close the formal hearing, I can do a little bit of question and answers with the board and with members of the public, or we can take it out into the lobby and talk further. So does that make sense? This is a state process required by law to be held in each of the counties that has state responsibility area. So 58 counties in the state, 56 have state responsibility area. The last time the maps were updated was 2008, so this is the 2022 revision. Today's purpose is to get verbal, oral, in-person comments on the record, but you have until February 3rd, next Friday, to do written, hand-delivered, or emailed comments. And on one of the forms, which is, I think, of all the forms, probably the best form, it's two-sided here. At the bottom of it, it talks about comments versus questions. You can ask questions all the time. Your questions are going to get responded to in real time. So if you have a question about the map, the model, the data, the regulation, the government process, how this is being done, you can submit a question via email and it'll get answered right away. If you submit a comment's different than a question. If you submit a comment, that's going to get held onto, and through the Office of Administrative Law, that's a state entity, AOL or OAL, when they go through the official adoption, which will happen sometime in February, after February 3rd, after public comment is closed, that's when you will could get a response. It'll be part of the regulatory process on any comments. So that's some confusion about questions versus comments. We're not here as part of a process to answer questions today. This is a comment period. So just like the county would do a comment period, this is the state doing a comment period. So with that being said, I'll become more or less like a robot. I'm going to read a script. We're going to show a video, and then we'll open it up for public comment. One bad thing, because we need to be consistent across all the counties we're holding these public hearings in, we're not going to be able to accept comments via Zoom or someone that's not here in person. Okay, that's not something CAL FIRE has afforded other counties to do. So the folks that are on Zoom, listening online, you can either try to attend another hearing in person in another county. There's about 8 of them left after today. You don't have to be from Lake County either to comment as well. You can be from a neighboring county anywhere in the state and comment as well today. So no online comments, but just remember your opportunity then is to submit in person, mail, or email. And that information's here, and I can go over it again. It's also in the agenda packet. Okay? I'll just pause for a couple moments here. I can maybe answer a question about the process, but I can't answer a question about any maps or the regulatory. So is everyone comfortable or understand what we're going to be doing as far as the public hearing? I'm going to read a script, show a video, have folks come up to the podium here, give your public comment, not a question, your public comment, and then we'll have a short little part for question and answer. Make sense? Okay. So here's the part where I become a robot and read a script. Good day. My name is Marshall Turbyville, and I'm a battalion chief with CAL FIRE. I call to order this public hearing for the County of Lake at 9:24 a.m. on January 24th, 2023. This public hearing is to receive official comments related to fire hazard severity zones for the County of Lake as required by our Public Resources Code Section 4203. This public hearing will be recorded, so please mute your phone. This will ensure that we have a clear recording of the meeting. The Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, is mandated by Public Resources Code Section 4201 through 4204 to identify fire hazard severity zones in state responsibility area. These are areas of significant fire hazard based on fuels, terrain, weather, and other relevant factors. Within state responsibility area, CAL FIRE has mapped 3 hazard zones: moderate, high, and very high. Statutes arose out of legislation following large, catastrophic wildfires to reduce damage from wildfires. CAL FIRE is revising fire hazard severity zone state responsibility area maps that identify wildfire hazard in areas for which the state has financial responsibility for wildland fire protection. Later in 2023, recommendations will be made for fire hazard severity zones in the local responsibility area, areas where local government has financial responsibility for wildland fire protection. Local governments will conduct public hearings and adopt local ordinances based on future recommendations from the Office of the State Fire Marshal. The model used to develop the fire hazard severity zone maps focuses on hazard alone, which takes into account the probability of the area burning and potential fire behavior in the area based on elements such as fire history, potential fuel over a 30 to 50-year period, blowing embers, terrain, weather, and the likelihood of structures igniting. It is not an evaluation of the level of risk that the area faces because it does not consider modifications such as defensible space, building construction, or water supply. I will now show a short video explaining how fire hazard severity zones were determined. This is the video I believe we provided. If it can be shown, it's roughly a 5.5-minute video.
Hello, I'm Jamie. I'm a member of the CAL FIRE modeling team that developed the Fire Hazard Severity Zone map for California. Fire hazard severity zone maps are built to describe relative wildland and urban interface fire hazard potential over the long term for all areas of the state. The zones reflect areas that have similar burn probabilities and fire behavior characteristics and are split into 3 classes: moderate, high, and very high. To explain the methods used in building fire hazard severity zones, we will show the sequence of steps and some key data inputs, zooming in on the north central part of Butte County near the cities of Chico and Paradise as an example. The same steps were used statewide. Different steps were taken for modeling fire hazard severity zones in wildland areas and non-wildland areas. Wildland areas include places such as forests, grasslands, and shrublands where the land cover is dominated by vegetation. In these areas, we can apply well-established scientific methods to model fire behavior such as spread and intensity. The potential fire behavior is combined with the likelihood of fire to get an estimate of the hazard. Non-wildland areas include urban, agricultural, and barren lands, and water or wetlands. In these areas, hazard arises due to embers coming in from adjacent wildlands and associated fire spread through urban vegetation and structures. We estimate hazard in non-wildland based on the number of embers, where those embers are likely to land based on local wind patterns and the slope and tree cover within the area, which can increase the chance of fire ignition and spread. The first step in building fire hazard severity zone maps is to define the zones, areas of the map where fire hazard severity zone scores are determined and a classification is calculated. The zones aim to capture patches of similar fire behavior potential or fire environments. Fire hazard severity zone classes are ultimately applied across an entire zone. The data inputs for developing the zone boundaries include slope and vegetation. Areas that have similar slope and flammability are aggregated or grouped into zones. There is no maximum zone size, but there is a minimum size of 200 acres for continuous wildlands and smaller for islands of wildlands surrounded by urban and agricultural lands. The fire hazard severity model for wildland fire has 2 key elements: probability of an area burning and expected fire behavior under extreme fuel and weather conditions. The probability of an area burning was calculated using fire history for the years 1991 to 2020. Knowing how much area burned within broadly similar areas of vegetation and climate allows us to calculate the annual likelihood of a fire occurring in that area. We then estimate the potential flame length if fire were to occur based on vegetation type, slope, and the local climate. Vegetation type and climate allow us to understand how much fuel may be present and how dry or available to burn it may be. Because fire hazard severity zones are intended to measure the potential hazard across multiple decades, we use a long-term look at fuel development and do not adjust our data inputs to account for recent fires or fuel management activities. We want to know what a fire could be like under the worst fuel conditions that may occur in an area. Similarly, for climate data, we use the worst 5% of fire weather observations that occurred on days when the weather is dry enough to carry fire. This allows us to capture areas that have infrequent but regular occurrences of hot, dry, and windy conditions and include that in our estimate of hazard. We then combine the probability of fire with the potential flame length to get a final score for hazard in wildland areas. All the scores within a zone are averaged to get a final value for that zone, and the zones are summarized into final classes of moderate, high, or very high. The first step in estimating hazard in non-wildlands is to model ember transport out of adjacent wildlands. Remember that non-wildlands include urban, agricultural, and barren lands, and water or wetlands, and that the hazard in these areas comes from adjacent wildland. To model embers falling onto these lands, we must consider how many may be produced and where they are likely to land in the event of a wildfire. The number of embers, also known as firebrands, produced in the wildland is a function of vegetation type, modeled flame length, and burn probability. We model the dispersal of embers into non-wildland areas under the worst local fire weather conditions when fires are more likely to challenge containment efforts. For example, if the worst fire weather at a given location tends to have winds predominantly out of the northeast at 40 miles per hour, modeled firebrands go predominantly to the southwest and go a greater maximum distance than they would at a site with predominantly 20-mile-per-hour winds. We then add up all the embers coming into the non-wildland to get an estimate of the relative number or brand load landing in a given location. We build fire hazard severity zones in non-wildland areas by generating buffers off any adjacent wildland. The initial zone classification is the same as the adjacent wildland, with buffers of lower fire hazard severity zone classes modeled at further distances from the wildland boundary. In addition to brand load, we include slope and tree cover in generating fire hazard severity zone buffers, as these factors can promote greater fire ignition and spread. The width of the fire hazard severity zone buffer is wider in areas that have higher brand load, steeper slope, and greater tree cover. In non-wildland, areas that are sufficiently far from hazardous wildlands can remain unzoned, in contrast to wildland areas, which always receive a zone designation. This completes the modeling process for fire hazard severity zones across all lands in the state. Once we have a final fire hazard severity zone map for all lands, the final step in map development is to extract state responsibility areas to fulfill the requirements of the regulatory process. If you have further questions on the zoning methods, please visit the Fire Hazard Severity Zone website for more information on the model and the project in general.
The existing fire hazard severity zones state responsible area maps were last approved in the late 2000s. Following these current county public hearings, the Office of the State Fire Marshal may elect to amend the maps or adopt them without revision. There are separate fire hazard severity zone maps for state responsibility area and local responsibility area. Each requires a different adoption process. The adoption process includes public hearings in the 56 counties that have state responsibility area. These public hearings are being conducted during a 45-day period from December 16, 2022 through February 3rd, 2023. If people wishing to make public comments are unable to attend a public hearing, comments may still be received during the entire 45-day period. The state responsibility area maps have been reviewed statewide by the 21 CAL FIRE units and 6 contract counties. Recommendations for changes have been provided. The recommendations have been reviewed by CAL FIRE Sacramento staff. The Fire Hazard Severity Zone state responsibility area maps are now available for review and to allow written comments as part of this regulatory public hearing process. Today, you will have the opportunity to provide written or verbal comments. Please understand that this public hearing is not designed to be a public forum or discussion. This hearing is only to receive comments as required in Public Resources Code Section 4203. Questions versus comments. Please understand at this public hearing, questions you may have are legally different from comments. All public comments received today will be transmitted to the Office of the State Fire Marshal and will be evaluated at a future date. If you have questions needing immediate answers, a full suite of resources are available to help answer those questions, such as historic background, scientific, regulatory, and implementation questions. Available at this public hearing are contact avenues for web-based and telephonic resources for any questions you may have regarding fire hazard severity zones. The Administrative Procedures Act requires a minimum 45-day period for the public to comment to the Office of the State Fire Marshal in writing on the proposed regulation. The notice of proposed rulemaking action specifies the rulemaking agency name, contact person, and address where the comments must be directed and the date the written comment period closes. Additionally, Public Resources Code requires that the Office of the State Fire Marshal not adopt a fire hazard severity zone unless the proposed regulation has been transmitted to the Board of Supervisors of each county where a zone is located at least 45 days prior to the adoption of the regulation, and that a public hearing has been held in that county during that 45-day period. Under the Administrative Procedures Act, at a public hearing, both written and oral comments must be accepted. All comments will be collected, summarized, and responded to in the final regulatory submission to the Office of Administrative Law. The only public comments considered by the Office of the State Fire Marshal are those submitted during the comment period or at this or subsequent hearings. Each speaker will have approximately 3 minutes to state their comments. Please queue up near the podium to provide comments. In order to accurately record your comment, please fill out and submit your comments on our comment cards. When speaking, please introduce yourself, the county and city in which you reside in, and your comment. I will now take the first commenter. I'll keep track of time up here. Probably county staff is doing the same.
Hi, good morning. My name is Randy Murphy. I'm the general manager for Hidden Valley Lake here in Lake County. Thank you for the presentation. You did answer a couple of my questions. A couple of comments that I have for consideration, and hopefully another look at the area immediately surrounding Hidden Valley Lake in particular. Hidden Valley Lake spends over $1 million a year in fire mitigation efforts. The latest map appears not to have made that in consideration, and your comments or the video made that clear, that you don't look at defensible space and things like that. So I at least understand why. I see and or receive many comments every month about people getting non-renewed on their homeowners insurance. I fear that this map, not reflecting improvements made specifically in Hidden Valley Lake area, will not help that. So South County Fire Chief Mike Wink has commented on numerous occasions that our area is a model for the entire state. So I would like, our brush score recently by one of the insurance agencies that do this kind of thing reduced our brush score from 88 out of a max of 100 to 43. That again is not apparent and reflected in the current or the suggested map. So my comment is, again, strongly encourage another look specifically at the Hidden Valley Lake area to help our residents stop getting all those non-renewals. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Andre, and I represent the Canocti Fire Safe Council in Kelseyville, as well as Riviera Heights Homeowners Association in Kelseyville. We understand that CAL FIRE is required by law to develop the hazard severity maps and only evaluate fire hazard, but the major negative impact of this report on all of our communities is exactly what the gentleman that was just here said also. There you are. This map is being used by the California insurance companies as apparent on the California Commissioner's website, and it is used by the California Insurance Commissioner's Office to assess fire risk, not fire hazard. This has drastic consequences for homeowners who live in high and very high fire hazard zones. Use of the hazard maps by insurance companies will cause hazard insurance premiums to escalate. Many hazard insurance policies will likely be canceled or not renewed. Homeowners will need to consider increasing their deductible amounts and reduce home replacement costs to rebuild their homes in the event of wildfire. They will not be able to afford to rebuild homes in this area with the escalation of insurance costs. Their only hazard insurance alternative is California Fair Plan. which I like to call the California Unfair Plan. It offers bare bones insurance for a exorbitant, absolutely exorbitant premium costs. And again, these insurance companies are using the CAL FIRE hazard maps as criteria for how they are assessing homeowners in Lake County. High fire hazard ratings and skyrocketing insurance premiums are competing to deter homeowners from doing mitigation work on their properties. We have, as a Fire Safe Council, and as there are 4 homeowner associations, there's 23 Firewise councils in Lake County. There's 3 fire safe councils. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of mitigation effort and mitigation work going on right now, none of which is reflected in the CAL FIRE hazard maps. And we believe very strongly that with the new technology that CAL FIRE has at their fingertips and was used in drilling down on these property maps, on the hazard maps, that same technology should be used with providing algorithms or map layering that reflect the mitigation work that has been done by these, by all of our homeowners associations, our communities, our individual homeowners.
At the 3 minutes.
I know, and I appreciate it. The only thing that any of us can change on here is fuel load. That is not, the fuel load that we have changed is not reflected anywhere in the maps, and we ask CAL FIRE to reconsider that and put that information into the maps for a more fairer assessment of the areas. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Bill Grudy. I am the president of the Buckingham Homeowners Association in Lake County and a board member of the Canocti Fire Safe Council. I would like to address the creation of the new fire hazard severity zone map from the perspective of the Buckingham community. In the new map, the entire Buckingham Peninsula is now in the very high category compared with the last map, when only half of the Buckingham Peninsula was categorized in that way. That is a very significant change. But I'm not here to argue about the data, but to say that however well-intentioned this map may be, we believe that it could very well undermine our efforts to reduce wildfire risk and could, in fact, inflict significant financial harm on the residents of Buckingham. We understand that the map is not designed to be used by insurance companies when they make underwriting decisions, but nonetheless, that is what is happening. In the past, some decisions that we have monitored based on the last map have gone in favor of property owners and others have not. But with the entire peninsula now in the very high category, we believe that most of the decisions going forward will be adverse decisions. We tell our property owners about the benefits of weed clearing, of taking down their dead trees and home hardening, but when they see that their efforts are not being recognized, it makes our job of building a community consensus around fire safety even more difficult. Our average property owner sees their fire hazard designation going from unzoned or moderate to very high at a time when it appears that all the work they've been doing and the efforts to become a fire-wise community are leading to things to go in the absolutely opposite direction. By and large, the property owners that we deal with do not make a distinction between a hazard assessment and a risk assessment, especially when they see that the map being used by their insurance companies is in fact often a hazard assessment map. In short, the optics are terrible. Again, we see that their efforts are going up, the efforts of our residents are going up, while the results appear to be going down. On behalf of the Buckingham Homeowners Association, I call on you to take steps that will make it clear to the insurance industry in a very forceful way that this map is not intended for use as a sole source of denying coverage. Thank you.
Good morning. John Knoll, retired Battalion Chief, Board of Directors of the Canocti Fire Safe Council and the Riviera Heights Firewise community. Here to share with you an example of just how your maps do impact insurance rates. My wife and I live in an area that on your current map shows as only a moderate hazard zone. So after spending several years on the California Unfair Plan and getting our most recent update that our California Fair Plan was going to $7,500, and then you add on top of that the wraparound that you're required to have, we're at $9,000 for the upcoming year. At which time I took your current map to a local insurance agency, and they agreed based on the efforts that we had been made and the CAL FIRE mapping, and they gave us insurance which is now 1/3 of what we've been paying historically under the California Fair Plan. Here's your proposed map with our property in the middle of it, just as Bill was indicating for Buckingham and everyone else. We've arbitrarily been placed in the highest hazard zone in spite of the fact that we still maintain a tremendous amount of vacant land and an orchard, and orchards and vineyards are not included. We would suggest to you, and I'm sure you're hearing this same message over and over again, what an incredible opportunity CAL FIRE has here to take the lead and add one more algorithm to your mapping process. And that algorithm would be recognition of FireWise groups, recognizing that here in the state of California, we have now over 500 FireWise communities, all required to accomplish and maintain all the hazardous fuels reduction and home hardening that is exactly listed on your website where these same maps exist. So we would encourage you, add that to your mapping process. You have an incredibly robust group of folks available now to accomplish that within your organization, and also with the folks that you have up and down the state that are identified and we utilize as our liaison officers through CAL FIRE to the FireWise community at the NFPA. So again, we would encourage you, please take advantage of this opportunity, set the standard and lead the way for hazard mitigation and home hardening in the state. The moment you add that algorithm to your mapping, the increase in folks that will want to participate in home hardening and fuels reduction and defensible space and maybe even survivable space will increase dramatically. So please add that one algorithm to it. And we know that it works because we know that the fire insurance companies themselves recently sent out a letter that indicates that by home hardening you increase your survivability by 40%, and by both home hardening and hazard reduction, which is all three zones, Zone 0, Zone 1, and Zone 2, you increase your survivability by more than 75% within the hazard zone. So again, we would encourage you, add that algorithm, give us the benefit of the doubt, throw us a bone that when we go out and we try to encourage more folks to become involved and become certified FireWise communities, that there's going to be some benefit to the tremendous amounts of money that we're spending. Hidden Valley, and like you say,
Sir, you're
model
come up on 3.
FireWise group spends $1 million. The rest of us throughout the county spend at least that much also. Add one more algorithm. Thank you.
How are all of you today? My name is Robert Gary. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Habematole-Pomo of Upper Lake. I'm also the Director of Cultural Resources. One of the concerns I think that come to mind and not really looking at as far as the draft process and the protocols for it is the buffer zone. Lake County itself is a high sensitive cultural resource area just due to the habitation of the indigenous communities that have been here. I guess the question that I have is to find out like what the method is, I think, for those buffer zones, how are those created? And then also the inclusion, I guess my comment is making sure that there's the inclusion of the tribal communities that are here for the protection of those cultural resources that are in their affiliated areas. To ensure that it's a part of the process, to make sure that, tribes are being consulted with. I think when those buffer zones are being constructed, I've been on projects and, for Habematole, the complex fires in our backyard. And so making sure the protection of those cultural resources for the tribal communities, and I think is making also to ensure inclusion with the tribal communities about their resources in their areas. And any map creation should definitely take into consideration the sensitivity of cultural resources from those communities. So I guess my comment is to make sure that there's an inclusion for tribal communities when those maps are created. Also keep in mind that information that is given as far as for the protection of those tribal cultural resources, those are confidential. So not too sure about, the sharing of maps, but just to ensure that if there is an area that we are looked at that's at a high level or a high rate, for fires, what's the method to be able to do that and to make sure that the protection of those cultural resources are a part of the process. So I just haven't received anything from CAL FIRE as far as for the creation of maps. Definitely something I know that we can be a part of. We have at Habemetal our own GIS analyst in our own mapping system. So if there's any help that we can do to ensure that any time that something happens, that that's actually a part of what we're trying to protect as well. Thank you.
No one else from the audience is planning to make a comment. I'll turn it to the board. If you'd like to make a comment, I'd like you to keep it to 3 minutes, but it's also your meeting. So.
Go ahead.
Just a couple comments, Supervisor Green. Oh, double mic, I like that.
We'll restart your time there too.
Will you? Timer for soups. Thank you for bringing this forward, and the comments so far have been interesting. One comment for accessibility, it took a little bit of a deep dive into the flyers and stuff like that to actually find the maps you're talking about. So just for people tuning in, if you follow the links deep enough, you'll get to a GIS type of thing, and the actual link is calfire-forestry.maps.arcgis.com. calfire-forestry.maps.arcgis.com, and it'll pop up what you see typically in these GIS maps, interactive stuff. So that's pretty impressive if you can get there, but you may have to deep dive into the materials presented so far. Some of the people who had spoken before did a before and after, so this particular online version of the proposed maps, if it had an overlay of the previous map so people could do a ready comparison of before and after, I think would be super handy. Apparently people have found a way to do it using the existing tools, but that's kind of something that could have been added as a layer fairly easy here, just to make it simpler for people to access. I am puzzled by a couple of the designations here, but that's more of a question than a comment. When I was on the City Council in Lakeport, these maps came up front and center as we were considering a housing subdivision in one of our parklands there that is directly abutted by very high-risk areas. And then the question at that time, and the question I'm still going to have here sitting in this seat, is this is a very extensive fire hazard map that basically shows the entire county in a very high-risk area. And at the time, local agencies are making land use approvals for building projects, for example. That's apparently more of a fire risk question than it is a fire hazard question. And so on the one hand, these maps are supposed to be used and relied upon in great detail as the Board of Supervisors or a city council within the County of Lake considers whether a particular building project can be safely done or not, and what mitigations might be needed to harden that development out the gate. And so the use of these tools for planning it's kind of problematic in my mind. I can't fully rely on this map to decide what happens in the city of Lakeport, for example. In a housing subdivision, I'd be hard-pressed to figure out how we would apply these maps for future housing developments in the unincorporated county. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to have more follow-up questions probably offline on this moving ahead, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you for bringing this here. My comments are meant to be more towards the people who have created this process. So appreciate the individuals in the room. Please know that the comments are not meant to be personalized to you. My colleague mentioned that the map, you have to do a little bit of a deep dive. For this being public comment, it should not be a find the map game. It should be very easy to click on one attachment and see what does Lake County look like yesterday on the map and what does it look like as proposed. I think that's not a good way to approach the public. We need to provide everything up front, not ask people to do a little bit more work to get to what we're asking and talking about. Overall, I get it. We've seen a lot of fires, so I understand why the map is moving in that direction, but the direction we're going is only going to hurt the rural areas, Lake County definitely, but the rest of rural California. The belief is we are dealing with climate change, which I am going to say rural California has not been the major contributor of, but we are the major recipient of the rules and regulations that will limit us in what we're going to be able to do. We have not created a concrete jungle everywhere, therefore development is still going to have to go through the process of how fire safe is it. This map, led by other efforts such as SB 50 that says no building of any kinds in high fire threat areas, will eventually eliminate any prospect of economic movement and progress here in Lake County. So I'm very nervous about what this map means. Insurance-wise, I see that the commissioner says that insurance companies are supposed to give us a reduction in home hardening and other things to be fire safe. That doesn't mention any decreases or any caps on insurance. It just means if you have $10,000 to $20,000 to spend, they'll decrease it a little bit, and I'd like you to look around in our community and see how many people can afford to do those things to the properties they own. So the benefit from the insurance commissioner, I don't see that as being a huge benefit here. It will be very limited in those that can access those services and those decreases. I think this is definitely a slap in the face to all of the efforts being made to mitigate fires. We have lived through fires, and we are doing everything that we can to try to limit and mitigate future fires, yet not having that as part of the algorithm, as stated by some of the public comment we've already received, it's demoralizing. It's a large effort, yet that effort is not found. And I understand, because you said 2008 or something like that was the last time it was updated. There's been no mention anywhere on when we expect to see this updated again. If it takes 10, 20 years, yeah, defensible space needs to be defensible space every year, every other year, whatever it is that you're actually taking down and making defensible space for. So over the course of 10 years, you can't see what it is today and estimate that it's going to be there in 2 or 3 years. So I ask, do this more often and use defensible space so we can prove that we are doing our part that you are asking us to do. We all want to win from this. I think I will stop there, but I'm also going to make a comment. Right now, please don't change this. Cities are exempt from the SRA. They are their own protection zones. I see this leading to a lot of cities being annexed and created in order to get out of this very disconnected creation that puts county unincorporated land in a very awkward situation of where people will no longer be able to live in because the rules that are set by this. And that is not a good idea. Economically and politically, that is not good, but at the same time, there are there are consequences for things that occur, and this could be one of the consequences from continuing to move forward with this map by not looking at the efforts that are being made. So, thank you.
Right here. Oh, you got it? You go ahead.
I do have one final comment, actually, and I hope that we can bring this back to the board so that we can provide a letter, a combined letter from the board on our comments, not as individuals, but as a board on our thoughts on this, and maybe even open it up to a broader conversation with the public as well, because I think a letter from the board would, by the date, February 3rd or whatever it was, I think is an important thing for us to look at.
Oak Simon, District 1 Supervisor. Yeah, you know, what I really wanted to focus on was the work being done here in Lake County. Since 2015, obviously we had the Rocker Fire, I think it was in 2015, right at the beginning. You know, Lake County has made some very large strides as far as moving forward. I just want to talk a little bit, it was talked about earlier about adding the algorithm for fire-wise communities, fire safe councils, Lake County Risk Reduction Authority. The county has also implemented a vegetation abatement ordinance. I think that really needs to be taken into context here. I think some of the comments that were made by the gentleman stood up from the Canocti Riviera, we've been trying to do the work, and this really is going to set us back in that, you know, engagement from the community. And we've got some great momentum. Yes, we've got some challenges to work through, but we've been selected as one of the 3 counties in the state of California for a home hardening program. It is in the Riviera area at this point, but we plan on that being countywide. We got a small pilot program for ingress and egress to make sure people can get in and out of areas safe. You know, we're just starting to do that work, and some of these things are coming directly from CAL FIRE. So we really need to look at that, of the work being done by each individual county, but just what needs to happen as we're moving forward. I am definitely concerned about the insurance implications that this will have in our area. We are all inundated by calls, and how do we figure that out? And the work we're trying to put down on the ground here is to say, listen, if you're moving into Lake County, we have the countywide vegetation abatement ordinance, we have the Lake County Risk Reduction Authority, which has all the cities, the tribes, water purveyors, all of our fire districts, everybody working together to make sure that we're continuing along those lines of working at home hardening, vegetation abatement, how we're going to be doing these things to move forward. So I really think, it just as was said, adding that algorithm in there for Lake County, I can't speak for the rest of the state, but I imagine you guys are going to get those comments from other areas that have done the great work, like we're trying to do on the boots on the ground here in coordination with our fire department. So I think for me right now, that's kind of my main comment. It really needs to be looked at. And I know our fire districts had a look at it, but you know, when a computer's making a decision, it just doesn't come out good as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't take into effect, there's no in between. How is the work being done? It's just black or white, and it doesn't take into account everything that's happening. I think here in Lake County, we've done a great job. We've got a lot of work to do for the next decade, but this is just going to set us back. And I believe right now, we're having the public hearing. Please, I will implore you as a county, you know, as a supervisor, I'm always asked, what can we do? I think our community needs to get their comments in. We need to figure that out, how it's on our website here at the county. We really need to let, you know, the governor and CAL FIRE know that we need to look at this in a different way. You know, I'm not going to say throw it out, but that's almost where I'm at. No, I got to be the one to say it, and I'm going to catch some heat for it, but we've got to do it in a different way. I've seen around the country here on the West Coast, they've tried to implement something like this in Oregon and other places, but our community members stood up and said, no, we've got to look at it differently. So, you know, I'm going to be the one saying it. We've got to look at this differently, because you can't just say, well, all Lake County is just, you can't live here. Well, people have been living here for thousands of years. It's how you live in the environment. It's the way you adapt, and it's the way we move forward as a community. And I think Lake County's embraced that to understand where we are, and to take advantage of this beautiful area that we live in, but understand that there are consequences if you don't do it right, and we're going to continue to try and build in that manner. So those are my thoughts right now. It is limited. I will say to the community, it is tough when you just come in and you get your 3 minutes and you say, well, this is it, just comment period, can't ask questions. I know it's frustrating, but you have until February 3rd, correct, to get comments in written form. And this isn't towards everybody in the room from CAL FIRE bringing this to us. This is just conversation we need to have for the entire community. So thank you very much, but those are my comments today. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
It's a double effect, right? Do I?
Yeah, do both.
Yeah, the second microphone is for CAL FIRE to get it on record.
Like a press conference. Yeah, no, my only comment, a lot of it has been stated already, and especially from the public. But there's also one of the things I wanted to highlight, one of the policies that were improved with or amended for RCRC. In the statement basically just says RCRC supports state-funded programs to aid socially vulnerable homeowners with home retrofits and defensible space efforts in order to mitigate individual and community wildfire risk. And they added this sentence, including mitigation efforts necessary to meet state or federal programs designed to increase insurance affordability and availability. With regards to some of the mapping and whatnot, I don't know if, I know that they'll be working on this with the state in regards to this as well, because we're a member of RCRC, so they'll be coming forward and making comments as well if they haven't already. But I just wanted to highlight that, that's in those policies, and they're advocating for us in that capacity as well, so.
So my comments are along the lines of my colleagues. This map, and I was able to find the map with the slider that shows the previous map and the current map that's proposed, and maybe we can put that up when we're done with this section of the hearing. But what we're looking at is a snapshot, and it's one piece in one moment in time of the terrain, of the vegetation, but it doesn't tell the whole story. When we look at the fires that we've had over the past couple of years, they've been smaller. And we can say we've been lucky, but really it's a combination of strategies from CAL FIRE, from local resources, from communities, and individuals making a difference. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the Cache Fire. We've seen that on the multiple fires we had in the Rivieres and Mount Konocti this summer. The responses are different. And so are the responses from the community. And those need to be looked at to make sure that this is a relevant document that is not just a moment in time, that shows proactive work. And so you've got to have that layering. If you want this to be one layer, that says one thing. But if you want to look at the communities that live here and the work that's being done, then we're going to need multiple layers here to take a true assessment of what's actually happening and what's going to happen and what's planned. What are the projects that are planned, and where's that commitment and accountability going forward? So, data is critical, but so is looking at the adaptability and and our communities working proactively.
Just briefly, another addition that was added to RCRC's policies that will be implemented from here forward, and they'll be advocating for in regard to legislation, is in the tribal section of the policies. They've added essential services coordination, which states that RCRC supports cooperation and collaboration between counties and tribal entities regarding essential public services within tribal lands, including firefighting, public safety, and emergency medical services. RCRC supports the use of MOUs, agreements, and mutual aid as mechanisms to establish coordinated essential services. So I don't know if that was in tandem with what was mentioned before, but I just wanted to highlight that as well. So.
Chair, are we okay if we just make sure no one in the audience has a comment now as well? As we're going to call the public comment period.
Can I make one?
Sure.
It's been brought up by everybody in this room about the algorithm, looking at this at a smaller snapshot, if you will. The technology exists. I can go online and almost look in my neighbor's windows based on just the drive-by technology using Google and the other online mapping programs. I would really like to see CAL FIRE go back and use smaller parcels, subdivide the zones, look at the effects that we are doing with defensible space, that we are doing with home hardening, and take that into account when building out these maps, that these are not, you know, our zones are overly broad, and we can narrow it down. We have the technology, it exists, to go to the parcel level and look at this. And I would really like to see CAL FIRE not only look at the algorithms, but actually drill down and subdivide those zones even smaller, take into effect what we are doing for defensible space, what CAL FIRE is driving for defensible space and home hardening, and take that into account, because these maps are coming out and having the opposite effect, because our constituents are going, why am I paying this much in insurance when I can't build back here? Why am I spending all this money on defensible space, all this money on home hardening, when I really see no benefit from it, because the state's taking my knees out from underneath me and forcing me to pay higher insurance rates? And we can all sit there and the state can say, you can't use these for your insurance modifiers. We absolutely know that's taking place. There's no penalty on the insurance companies, because the insurance companies can just say, no, we send out our own adjusters. We create our own maps. It's the state has to be more aggressive and more helpful for its constituents. We're not asking the state to come in and do the work for us. We're asking for the state to make our work easier and to make it beneficial, because you are hurting. I know you're hurting my district and you're hurting my constituents, because with these maps, and as they continue to evolve, because they are overly broad. And as you've heard in this room, we have fire safe councils, we have risk reduction authorities, we have fire districts that are working very hard to promote home hardening and defensible space. And I'm going to go back to home hardening and home hardening and home hardening over and over and over again. We don't need to denude our landscape. We definitely need to modify it. But there's a better way to this, and CAL FIRE needs to take these maps and go back and subdivide, drill down, and take into account all the hard work, all the money that's been spent through state grants, federal grants, local community organizations, and even on individual properties, to benefit us, not to have it taken away from us because an overly broad map that an insurance company is just going to say, we'll see you later. Thank you.
Chief Reitz, did you give your name?
I'm sorry, I can, if I did. Yeah. I'm Patrick Reitz. I am the fire chief for the Lakeport Fire Protection District here in Lake County. Thank you.
Can I follow up with a comment after his? Thank you. So as the chief was mentioning home hardening, we have entire communities that have been rebuilt to the most current standards. And we have to have that reflected here. In the middle of this giant red blob that is most of the Cobb and Anderson Springs community, we have homes that are entirely built after 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. Those are all with the current standards and home hardening and defensible space. And there's not any recognition of that in these maps.
Yeah, just very quickly again, Supervisor Green. I'm going to part ways with the speakers and my colleagues on the algorithm, on the request that we start analyzing fire risk in these maps as opposed to fire hazard. The fire hazard is the thing on the map that creates the incentive to start hardening your homes and stuff like that. I don't hear anybody attacking the science that drives the hazard assessment. And we have lived through so many wildfires in this county in the last several years. We've seen the wall of flames. We haven't seen just garden variety wildfires. We've seen catastrophic wildfires that we have never seen the scale of before. So I don't know that it is helpful in any way to say, oh, we need credit for vegging out a brush around my home. We get credit for a home hardening. When the Riviera burns, and not if it burns, but when it burns, it's going to be catastrophic. People are going to lose their lives. And we've seen this movie before, Paradise. One of my first jobs out of college was in Paradise. They talked about it 30, 40 years ago. Boy, when this place burns, it's going to be bad. How much home hardening happened around there? How many lives were saved by all the home activities? When it comes to insurance and concerns on that, absolutely. We're talking to the wrong people. We need to talk to the insurance commissioner, the governor, whatever. It's not CAL FIRE. We're not going to game the hazard maps so that we can get a break on our insurance. Rather, we should accept what the hazard map says. Basically, the entire county, given the right climate conditions, can burn. What are we supposed to do about that? The discussions we have come after the assessment of the hazard. So I believe the assessment of the hazard in the revised maps is dead on correct. If we want to talk about the other things that have been addressed here in other venues and in other mapping tools, that's certainly appropriate. We can talk about it. But the hazard assessment proposed in this mapping is absolutely spot on correct. Thank you.
I just have one more thing to add. Thanks. Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Supervisor Green, but this is just one aspect that we're looking at. We have a holistic view of our communities and what needs to happen. But what I also don't quite understand is what is the benefit, or is there a benefit? Are there going to be more resources to these areas? Are there going to be more strategic pre-positioning? Is there any benefit to having these maps as far as strategies that will change coming from CAL FIRE and state response?
Seeing no more comments, I'm going to call the public hearing to close, and then we'll go to the last agenda item, which is question and answer. Just want to make sure there's no more comments that want to go on record, as far as oral or verbal. Okay. Thank you for attending today's public hearing. As a reminder, once the public hearing is officially closed, oral comments on the regulation will no longer be accepted today. However, the public has until February 3rd, 2023, to submit their written comments, and the process for doing that is located on the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking Action document. A copy of the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking Action document is available for you today. In addition, further information about the Fire Hazard Severity Zone Map, phone number, link to the public website, information, email address, and other relevant informational aids are available in the room should you like to take some copies home with you. The audience will also have an opportunity to ask questions during the informal breakout session with any of the CAL FIRE staff. Again, thank you for attending today's public hearing, and I formally adjourn this public hearing, and it's 10:19 a.m. Thank you. If I can just give a quick presentation and
Sure.
kind of remind you guys about the process and everything else if you want to do a public comment. Sure. So, real quickly, the statistics, and this is some of the handouts in back of the room, and whether this is good or bad, what's proposed is 92.8% of the SRA in Lake County will be considered very high. So about 400,000 acres of state responsibility in Lake County, roughly 93% of that will be very high. If you look at other counties throughout the state, I think there's about 2 or 3 that have a higher percentage of SRA going to very high or will be in very high. So that gives you some perspective across the state. And then just as a kind of explanation, state responsibility areas where CAL FIRE has jurisdiction for, mainly for suppression. You have the Mendocino National Forest in Lake County. You have some BLM lands, some BIA lands. Those are all technically federal, so they are not going to get modeled as part of this. However, in cities, incorporated cities, or portions of the county outside of SRA and outside of a city limit that are called local responsibility area, those maps are going to be released to the county and the cities. So you'll get maybe in 6 months, maybe as short as 3 months, but I think it's going to be about 6 months. The local agencies are going to get notified that the state, Office of State Fire Marshal, CAL FIRE, it's more or less one and the same. We modeled your local responsibility area in the city or in an incorporated county that's not SRA, state responsibility area, sorry for all the acronyms, and this is what it is. This was also done back in 2008. I was involved back then as well. I do not believe there was any what's called very high local responsibility in Lake County going back to 2008. Some of the cities and the counties could have done what's called the WUI zone, but this all pertains to the building code, not about insurance necessarily. So that's the process. This is just where CAL FIRE has jurisdiction. You won't see any federal lands modeled or any data coming out on that, but you will at some point have local responsibility, which is inside cities and unincorporated Lake County. That'll get modeled at some point, and that'll come back, and I'd love to help you guys with that process too if needed. So what we're doing right now is we're going through 45-day public comment on state responsibility area classification. How this state responsibility area is put into one of 3 zones. Some of the building codes, really, it's just whether you're in SRA or not. It doesn't matter necessarily what zone you're in. But for hazard disclosure, Assembly Bill 38 with defensible space inspections, that's some of the stuff that this stuff triggers. So just as a reminder. And then some of the board's comments, and I'll offer, if you guys want to do any type of forum, whether online, in person, and we also have Chief Duncan here, who's the lead CAL FIRE official for Lake County, I'm willing to do whatever to get you guys the information so you have it. We're just under the gun a little bit here. February 3rd, next Friday, is the deadline for public comment. But absolutely, the board, the county, I think there's at least 2 other counties in the Sonoma Lake Napa unit that are providing to do public comment. I think most of you guys are all notified via CSAC too as well, and maybe the rural counties. So there's other things I think going on. I'm not really privy to that, and I shouldn't be, but that's all part of that public comment period. So if you do want to get a public comment in, just make sure you get in by next Friday, or put somebody on notice that you guys are planning to do a comment. I'd hate you guys to get shut off by a deadline, if that makes sense. Any information you guys need, the slider map, finding stuff, I got the proposed map and back. I'll help you guys with any of that if you need to as well.
So our next board meeting is after the deadline, and so we can give notice that we're going to be sending our comment in late?
I mean, I don't know officially how this is all going to work, but I would say you should probably, let somebody know.
Deadline, it's easy.
Okay. Susan?
I don't know if on this
I've
agenda.
already added it to the 31st. It'll be the last item on that day.
Oh, right, the 31st.
On the
That's our
special
workshop.
A workshop special meeting? Is it a special item for the workshop? Okay, great.
And just as a reminder, anything we're talking about now is not officially public comment or on the record. That closed. So anything we talk about now, you need to follow up in writing or hand deliver or email, and that's the information here. So I just want to make sure you guys have that opportunity to get those comments in. We're taking all this stuff with us today, the recordings and everything. If you guys have written comments to turn in, we did have a recommended form in the back of the room, but you don't have to use this. There is CAL FIRE Sacramento staff here that'll take it right back to CAL FIRE Sacramento to get it submitted. Also can do in person, email, or mail it in as well. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. That's kind of the end of my presentation, unless there's questions from the board, but thank you very much.
Johanna, I emailed you the link with the slider. Can we put that up on the screen so the public can see?
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I do have a question for you. So I mentioned it's been since 2008. You've mentioned that it's been since 2008. Is there any plans to make this happen more often, or are we stuck with this map for another 14 years potentially?
So you're correct. The last maps were done in 2008, end of 2007. The plan is every 5 years for CAL FIRE to update. How this momentum got going is it was a legislative action that directed CAL FIRE to do it. So I believe the Public Resources Code, that's a state law, says every 5 years, but obviously CAL FIRE, been 14 since the last update, and this was driven by, hey, in light of all the recent bad fires the last 5 years, you know, building construction defensible space is where it's at. Make sure the hazard's known to folks so they can mitigate that risk.
Thank you.
Point about homes built after all the, you know, fires, including 2015 on, they're all built to Chapter 7A, which still currently is the building code standard.
Right. Yeah, so this map has the slider, and Johanna, if you just, this is the current map on the, or the proposed map on the left. The previous map, the old map is on the right, and so you can slide back and forth.
Red is bad.
Want to zoom in, maybe zoom into Clear Lake, and we can look at maybe the Riviera or
Yeah, that's a good spot right there. You can just,
so on this map, yellow, there's 3 classifications for state responsibility. Yellow is moderate, the orange is very high, and you can see the more non-transparent orange there, and then red is very high. So what you're seeing, and if we look at the statistics, about 30% of the yellow, 30% of moderate got upgraded to a high and very high. Majority of that went to a very high. And remember, the science is why homes burn is sustained heat, just heat on the side of your house eventually will catch it on fire, or embers find an opening to get into your house. So this is, you know, the warmer weather, the longer summers, the windy conditions, the vegetation type, timber, brush, producing embers and heat, how that's now being modeled.
What percentage went the other way?
oh, you have to come up to the microphone, please.
Just it's broken up by county on the sheet in the back. I think in Lake County, none of it went the other way.
Well, yeah, I'm asking statewide how much went the other way. I mean, we've burned tremendous acreage and taken some of the heat out of some of these potential fires because the heavy fuel loading is now somewhat less. And now we're dealing with flashier, brushier fuel models. So I would be curious, you know, you've referenced what's gone the bad way, but what's going the good way? Is there any significant decrease from very high to high or high to moderate?
So I don't have at the statewide level all the percentages, but if you look at by county, Del Norte had a drop of 14.7%. I think Imperial County had a drop of 17.6%. I think also Humboldt. I don't have it like in front of me, but I can get it for you.
It's more of a rhetorical question,
Right.
but
Yeah, so here's the thing about how these vegetations look like. So let's just say a fire happens and a forest gets converted to grass or totally burned. It's still modeled as what it could be in 50 years. So it's still modeled as a forest. And so that's the problem with defensible space, fuel breaks, all that good risk reduction, still get modeled as if it's not there.
Well, that's what they said on the video is that, first of all, that they are averaging the zone. So, you know, that if you know, 51% of the zone, that's going to be averaged up to the other direction. So there to me is a problem with some of the modeling and the fact that you're saying, well, in 50 years, it's going to look like this. Well, given the fire history in California, these areas are burning every 3 to 7 to 10 years, not every 50 years as the discussion we're having at this point in time. So I think the modeling is a bit flawed if we're going to be looking at it that way. And I understand I'm outside of the public comment period, but this goes back to my original comments during the public comment period. And I would continue to echo and ask you to go back to the state and go, wait a second, why are we looking at a 50-year model when we should be looking at a 10-year model? Because we all know we go back to the same areas that have burned time and time again with our teams. Thanks.
Yeah, that's just a good reminder. This is all off, you know, I don't want to say off the record, it's part of a Board of Supervisor meeting, but this is not going to get fed back to CAL FIRE unless you guys put this in writing. You know, I can't receive, you know, public comment like that, just so you guys know. So all good discussion. And one of the questions I got asked in another hearing was, well, why can't we do like an informational session before the official public hearing? And the answer is, you know, I could intimidate somebody, I could give a bad answer to somebody. The thought being is you come and just give your public comment based on what you know. And so that's why the question and answer session on the agenda here is after the official public hearing. But I understand that, you know, finding information on our website is not always the best because it's a statewide website. Understanding all these terms can be confusing, you know, interpreting that map there as well, you know. So that's what I'm saying. If you want help or we do something with a community meeting, I'm all about helping out. There is stuff on the insurance side, like the Firewise USA. There is the Board of Forestry last year did the California Risk Reduction Community List, which is through the California Board of Forestry. There's now an insurance certification you can get on a house. So there's all these other risk reduction certification processes that are, I think, somewhat trying to encourage, or I don't want to say force, but make it more appealing for insurance companies to provide you insurance. You know, rates, how much you pay is another concern. And then, as somebody mentioned, the elected insurance official is you know, different than the Board of Forestry, different than CAL FIRE as a department of the state.
Is there any other public comment? We can open it up to the Zoom room this time. Is there anyone in Zoom that has public comment? Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments on this issue before we close it out? I have the question about what are the benefits that will come with this, and is this more resources, more targeted programs? You know, do you have any sense on what we can expect on the positive side from this type of mapping?
So the only positive thing, and consider, you know, positive or not, is the current CAL FIRE grants that are open called the fire prevention grants, which are due March 10th. I haven't checked the form in the last week or two, but it does ask what percentage of your project area is in a very high, or what is your fire hazard severity class? And so that's a question, and it's not 100% weighted. I don't know exactly what the selection is, or what the committee uses to select it, but that is one benefit, is you can articulate you have a higher hazard now for potential for going after grants. Is CAL FIRE going to get more resources? Is more resources like firefighters going to be available to local agents such as Lakeport? There's no tie to that. So one of the ways this has been explained to me, it's like a 100-year floodplain. You either live in a floodplain or you don't. And if you live in a floodplain, is you know, what's that? How many years is a 1 in 100-year flood, 1 in 30-year flood? It's kind of that type of ranking. So then you can put levees up, you can, you know, elevate houses. It's that mitigate risk mitigation. So there's really no tie to the response stuff, but there is a part of it in the CAL FIRE grants. So there's the CAL FIRE fire prevention grants. There eventually be the forest health grants. There's also the workforce development grants, you know, that CAL FIRE offers too.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I just want to share with you some of the troubles that I've had lately in trying to mitigate fires to the east of the city of Clear Lake. And this is where you have levels of bureaucracy that kind of compete against each other. The Cache Creek Wilderness touches the city of Clear Lake, and then there's the National Monument as well. We were able to do some mitigation right on the border through some county land and through some private land. But touching the Cache Creek Wilderness right now has been an ultimate barrier, saying we have never done this before, we have never mitigated fires, we don't know how to do that, basically scared of liability. But these maps show us where the danger is, and when we know where it is and we're trying to do something about it, we're being prevented from doing some of the work. And so I hope that in the future, when presented with these updates and maps, that they are made to benefit the purpose of mitigating, not just for us to see that there's red right there, because that part is very frustrating for me on my end. Is we're doing everything we can to have the conversations to protect, and yet there's barriers that exist even though we see it on the map that says there's a danger zone right there. And so I hope we can find ways to elevate the urgency of getting mitigation done rather than being stuck with the rules that we've created. Protecting is good. We need to go through an environmental process before we do any of those things. But at the same time, the longer we wait, the more we're going to have another Rocky Fire or another Valley Fire, and that part does not please me at all. So just wanted to express that those are some of the hurdles that we have in front of us. And while the map exacerbates the problem in the sense that it's become more red, more extreme fire threat, it doesn't provide any assistance for us at this moment in time to overcome the barriers we currently have.
And I appreciate that comment. So Paul Duncan is here, you know, the Lake County lead CAL FIRE official. Also, I think many of you are familiar with Mike Wink. He just promoted to what's called the pre-fire division chief, so this is kind of his thing now. So if we want to talk offline, Mike, Paul, about what are the options out there. And there is some stuff with the federal agencies that we could look into. We talk a lot of it about grants, but there's also, and I'm going to maybe not know the best term for this, but the FEMA grants, hazard mitigation grants, that might be a possibility too. I'm involved in another county that's been getting, or potentially going to get millions of dollars at the federal level for mitigation. So can that be extended there as a possibility between the city, the state, and also the federal agency there? It might be a possibility. There is dozer lines out there on those ridges, and just putting a project together, going through the process. But and that just brings up another thing, when you look at these maps coming down for local responsibility, that might be an example where you're going to see now very high in that city. I don't know how much it'll be, but I would not be surprised if there's some very high there too now in local responsibility.
Right. And we've walked the ridge with Chief Duncan and Chief Wink, so they're very well aware of the project, but I will definitely continue to reach out and see if there's ways to break down the obstacles.
I'm up here and talking to Mike, Paul.
Any other comments from the board? Supervisor Green?
Just very quickly, is the fire hazard designation considered at all when prescribed burns are proposed? Like, is it harder to do prescribed burning in a very high-risk area versus a moderate?
No, not really. It's, to be truthful, we got to fill it out that it's in a very high or whatever it might be, but there's a whole separate checklist that's a complexity rating that more has to deal with, are we going to damage the watershed? How close are we to homes?
So it's project-specific, site-specific. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming today. It's not obviously the best news that we want to see and hear, but having the community give their input is critical. So everyone that's listening online and in the chambers today, please submit your comments by February 3rd. We will be submitting our comments from the board. And then we just continue to work in collaboration with all of our partners here in CAL FIRE and our local response to continue to protect our community. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I think we will take one more item maybe before we take a break. Yes, I got a thumbs up out of the corner of my eye. Okay, so 6.4, 9:45 a.m. item, public meeting to allow public testimony by members of the public to provide comments on the renewal of the Lake County Tourism Improvement District and levy of assessments. And this is from the administration office.
Yes, Brian Fisher is here to speak on this matter. Come forward.
You can come up if you like here.
Oh, I'll stand here.
Okay.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. Thank you for seeing me again, and city administrators, or
Your
county
name?
administrators. As you know, this is our day to hear from other folks, other stakeholders. We've gone through the process of renewing the district. Our Tourism Improvement District, AKA Visit Lake County, will renew on January 1st, 2024. We've already gone through negotiations with our stakeholders on the assessment from 3% to 2.5%, which we will present at the very final meeting with you on February 7th. And we have achieved the over 50% weighted vote to approve this district at this point. And we're excited about moving forward with it. And we look forward to taking any comments from the public today or anybody who would like to talk.
Can you state your name, please, for the record?
I am Brian Fisher, the Executive Director of Visit Lake County.
Okay, thank you. So I know this is for public comment, but any comments going before we start that from the board members?
I just wanted to make sure that the board recognized, because I hadn't looked at the agenda again since last night, that there has been a comment submitted through our Granicus public comment. Just wanted to make sure the board was aware.
Okay.
And it would appear the comment is a comment of protest.
Okay, so this comment is from a Lake County resident. There's little transparency and a lack of plans for each parcel in this application. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. Did we get the email?
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, if you have it up.
I didn't see it.
Right here, the letter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read it. So it says, "To whom it may concern, I'm writing to formally protest the proposed renewal of the Lake County TID. We are a small family business that has run a 21-unit model in Middletown for over 20 years. Since the Lake County TID has come into effect, our business has not had any increase in revenue due to the exposure from the marketing and sales promotions we have been told would occur. In fact, most consumers are unhappy to pay another tax on top of the sales tax for the room, and the added room cost has caused our business to wane. I respectfully request that you note my formal protest of the renewal of the Lake County TID. Yours sincerely, Dennis R. Allenbaugh of Eagle and Rose Inn."
Yeah, we tried multiple attempts to reach Mr. Allenbaugh for conversations about the Eagle and Rose in Middletown, and this is the first we've actually had a discussion with him. So I do have data that I can share with him on how many times folks have used his property. I know that he works a lot with service workers who stay in his property, and we have heard from many of our stakeholders that that service worker community is not well served by tourism marketing, and I understand that, as I also own a 7-unit space, and I do work with some service workers, especially in the wintertime. But I would argue that moving forward with our tourism district is really crucial for Lake County. We have been at it now for 4 years with the 1.5% assessment, which we have, now that we've looked at it from 4 years in hindsight, is not enough to fund our district. We really need more resources in order to move forward. But I would point out that, you know, we have to look at the entire picture. We have seen growth in visitor website from prior, starting in 2018, from 6,000 unique visitors to over 86,000 in this last year. We are moving in the right direction, and we will continue to move in the right direction, but we need the resources to get there.
Okay. Do we have public comment in the chambers or on Zoom?
I do not see any hands on Zoom.
Anyone in the chambers? Okay, then I'll close this item, and we've just had the one comment. That'll be part of the record. And bring it back to the board. Anything?
No action required.
Yep. No final comments? Okay. Then we'll close this item.
Thank you.
And we will take a 7-minute break to 10:50 and come back here for the next item. Okay, we are back, and we are going to move on to our 6.5 10 a.m. meeting, consideration of memorandum of understanding between the County of Lake and the City of Clear Lake for the design costs related to the regional skate park in District 2. Supervisor Sabatier.
So I was going to prepare a PowerPoint presentation, but seeing our agenda, I'd rather go through this quickly, but obviously go through the process. On March 1st, came to the Board of Supervisors with a letter of intent to talk about a regional skate park that would be built in the city of Clear Lake in the Austin Park area. There is currently a park there, but the park is old. The park requires a lot of maintenance, and it's easy for it to get damaged because of the type of materials that are used to build it. So the idea was to upgrade it to a concrete park. That letter of intent was approved by the Board of Supervisors. Worked with the City of Clear Lake and staff to create an RFP. Well, let me be a little bit more specific. The City of Clear Lake staff created an RFP, and we received 2 proposals. As you see in the memo, I provided both of those proposals, quite different in what was offered. We decided to go with the American Ramp Company for $43,500. And before you is an MOU that places the City of Clear Lake as the lead agency on this project. That way the county is not the middleman, but middle person. And however, my discretionary cannabis tax funds would be used to pay for the entirety of the $43,500. And I will continue working with the City of Clear Lake. We are meeting on Monday, I believe, with the American Ramp Company to start discussing the project, and just looking for your approval so that we can go ahead and receive invoices from the City of Clear Lake and reimburse them for the cost of the design process.
Okay. Anything from the board on this item? I'll open up to public input. Anyone in the chambers or on Zoom? Add anything?
Hi, yeah, my name is Robert Gary. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Bemital Pomo of Upper Lake, and also work on behalf of site protection and cultural resource protection for Koi Nation down in Clear Lake. And so I did want to comment on this project just for the fact that there are concerns that we have with this. Currently, we are trying to create protocols and processes set for the protection of tribal cultural resources in the area. It's definitely a sensitive area. Currently, there are spoil piles that are out there that came from a dig for the actual water park project portion of it. Found soils, habitation soils that date back to 12,000. Found artifacts that were dated back 8,000. And so on the very first day of construction out there, we found, I want to say, around 1,500 pieces. Very sensitive area. Very, very sensitive village site that's out there, even according to the cultural resource study that was done out there. My comment is to make sure before this gets passed, to make sure that there is either protocols or processes setting in place prior to this, working with the tribes that are affiliated with the area, making sure that the preservation of that history from the indigenous community that are out there are set into place and agreed upon before anything else happens. Just a lot of things that are happening, and it's definitely a sensitive area where the location where this is. We've been in contact and even in consultation both with the City of Clear Lake about our concerns for that specific area. Like I said, according to not just the relative information or cultural information from the tribe, but even through the study, there are known sites that are out there. And so they've been impacted that are out there. Some of the past practices, I think, within the city of taking soils from one location and using it into another location has been done. We're trying to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen. And we're in the process of trying to create protocols to ensure the protection and the preservation of those sites. Those sites are important to the indigenous communities. It's a part of the history of the first peoples that were here. If we don't have a concern about those to make sure that there's protection for those, it's actually an act of erasure of the indigenous communities that are from here. And so we just want to make sure that there's something before this project goes forward, that there's protocols and process set in place. AB 52 under CEQA requires that to happen, to make sure that there's an agreement of between both, whether it's the city, the state, any other agency, and the tribe for the protection of those cultural resources. And I would just, my comment here is to make sure that we have something set in place in this MOU, if it's going to be acted on today, that's going to ensure that that will happen for those cultural resources that might be impacted by this project. Highly sensitive area. Definitely things have been found. There's things that are out there currently right now that we've found adjacent to it, and we're talking within feet. Anything, according to our office, that's within a quarter of a mile that we have for down there, like I said, is deemed to us sensitive. But definitely cultural resources can be and will be impacted just due to the things that have been found out there with the last project portion of it. Thank you.
And so in response to that, this is only for the design, and I understand the relationship currently with the City of Clear Lake and its projects. We have discussed the sensitivity of the area as well. Can't say that it's set in stone, but we are looking to build up and not do any kind of digging or anything like that. We want to make sure that we disturb the least amount as possible. But I'd love to see this move forward as it is solely design, not construction. And those conversations can continue and hopefully find a conclusion prior to ever having to do any type of construction. The design process will have town hall meetings. In fact, I have some very professional skaters that want to be involved in the conversation so that we can design what would be the best park for beginners all the way to experts. And we'll see what that design ends up looking like. But at this point in time, sensitivity is definitely on our mind, but I don't think that the design itself proposes an issue. Obviously, we would be spending money that maybe alterations would be needed at the end, but I'm comfortable moving forward knowing that there is going to be a conclusion between yourself and the City of Clear Lake and the conversations that have been happening, and I'm comfortable moving forward with the design process. So just wanted to make that statement.
Yeah, just to answer back with that, I think for myself is, you know, as far as coming from the tribal perspective, we're trying to get to the table as early as possible. So this is like perfect time as far as we're trying to develop a concept for this. And so ensuring that we know the tribe has sensitive information about that area, not just with the archaeological study that's been done. But I think having the tribe at the table for this conceptual, or even after this conceptual meeting with the tribe as early as possible, is definitely something how the tribe really would like to go forward with projects that happen in Clear Lake. Is just, how do we do that? And really at the earliest stages that we can be at that consultation table or conception table is the best way. You know, like I said, you know, once cultural resources is destroyed, it's non-renewable. We don't get that back. Part of the tribe's history is gone. And that happens with all of Lake County. It's just a fact. It's a highly culturally sensitive area. And there are ways to be able to mitigate and manage projects on how they go forward. But there just has to be inclusion. And I said this, you know, in my prior statement, there has to be inclusion with the tribal communities that are from those affiliated areas to be able to sit down and figure out and mitigate and come up with a plan of how to make a project go forward, but to still protect the cultural and the historical resources that are there for the indigenous communities. And then not only that, really an important part, because there's a lot of misunderstanding or even uneducation about the indigenous communities that were here in Lake County. So, you know, we've been pushing forward, you know, how can we better make that relationship and educate, you know, the community that's out there about all of us, and, you know, interpretive signage, you know, I don't know, other ideas of what can we do to put, you know, something out there to help educate our county about, you know, those communities as well. So I'm hoping that, you know, those things are incorporated, especially into these open spaces, you know, for parks and things like that. So definitely something to keep in mind when this comes up. But, you know, we do have concerns because the area is highly sensitive. We don't only say that. You know, the data says it, you know, from the cultural resource study that was done. And we just want to make sure that there's something set into place. And if we can get at the conceptual stage and come up with a design to make this happen, I know the tribe would definitely be, for that. But we just want to make sure that there's, the right verbiage and things, process that is set in place to ensure that the tribe's resources are being protected through CEQA and AB 52.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes. So I just wanted to add that a good place to use as an example is the harbor dredging in Lucerne. This doesn't have an effect on what the support or non-support, but I just wanted to highlight that Robert was present with another EPA director and tribal historic preservation officer, along with community development, and I think Susan was there as well. And the project was scheduled for 2021 or 2020, I think, yeah, 2020. Looked as if it was getting there. There was a site there, and we made the decision to go forward and work with the tribes. That way it can go through that process. We had meetings, town hall meetings. We invited the folks from the representative tribes to come and explain that there weren't hindering or stopping the project, even though it was hindered because of the CEQA requirement in AB 52, but they were giving examples of how they would mitigate the work at the project. So for example, they would have a plan in place ahead of time rather than just stopping the whole thing. I think a lot of times the community thinks that that's what's going to take place. It's going to stop everything, because I know when you watch movies or whatever, they're like, oh, the tribe stopped it, so it's ending. But that's not what happens. They have plans in place to mitigate the work and move forward. And I was hoping that situation could be an example and a boilerplate for the whole county to work in collaboration with mitigating this situation, and hoping to go further out of different counties so they could use the same method and ensure that they work together. So I think that's possible, and I think had that taken place in 2020, 2019 timeframe, we may not have even had to extend, but there was other things that took place that stalled it out, including COVID. So but I just wanted to highlight that for you. It's just advice.
And I think that slightly different for that project, as I believe it originally was CEQA exempt, and then recognized that that's not the correct avenue to take, and took a different route. Obviously, the city of Clear Lake is in conversations with the tribes at this moment in time, so they're recognizing that this is a conversation that needs to continue and not be skipped. And again, I think within the design, there's open town halls. Absolutely, I will gladly submit all designs to you so that you can get that review. It'll be available to the public as well. That way your input could be provided ASAP rather than a later time. But this being the design, I'd love to keep moving forward, making sure that we are inviting everyone to the conversation, and that upon construction, that everything has been finalized before we approve any construction. And right now, there is nothing to approve for construction. This process will create the construction plans that will then be used as an RFP to go out and find the construction bid and which one we go ahead and choose from. So I think that within this process, we can make sure that everything is finalized and appropriate.
Okay.
And I mainly just was trying to highlight the fact that in the meetings, the representatives came, and it really helped kind of educate and give more knowledge to it. So that was what my statement was about.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Sherry Treppa. I'm the chairwoman of Hebemato-Poma of Upper Lake Tribe. I have been so since 2008 and was the vice chair since 2004. AB 52 is a state law that was enacted purposely to involve tribes and tribal nations in the say of their Aboriginal lands and their cultural resources, which sadly, because of federal action, was outside of our control. Fortunately for us, I do believe the county has come a long way, and so thank you for your efforts there. But there are still several agencies that have a severe lack of understanding or even the requirements in AB 52. I think it is vital that you as leaders do something about ensuring that there is well-educated leadership in the community heading up agencies that have impacts in this community and on tribal land and non-tribal land. We hold trainings on AB 52, PL 280, VAWA, ICWA, all of the relevant laws that do apply here fairly frequently, annually, et cetera, and have had the pleasure of working with Sheriff Martin in the past and many of you to educate. We will continue to hold those, but I do believe it is the responsibility of the county to ensure that everybody is well-versed in laws like that, particularly because you have 7 tribes here. And a lot of lands that, you know, were formerly ours are no longer in our control, and we would like to do whatever we can to help in that effort by funding some of those trainings if needed. We have done so in the past and continue to work with you all as much as we possibly can. So I would just like to echo Robert Geary's comments about getting to the table early, because that way, mitigation is in the reality and can be planned for, and extra monies aren't expended in a project that, wouldn't be necessary to do. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if this started. No, it didn't.
Mike has.
Yes. Okay, but we're still, is this in response to the, okay. I just want to finish public comment.
Okay.
Alan Florsey, Manager City of Clear Lake. Appreciate Supervisor Spatier's support of this project, and hopefully the board's support. We're certainly familiar with the sensitive areas in Austin Park and surrounding areas. You may recall that we did a very significant renovation of that park a few years ago, side by side with the tribe's involvement, and we will continue to fulfill our obligations under state law and AB 52. As all of you, I'm sure, are aware, with AB 52, you have a project, and then you initiate consultation based on the definition of that project. In many cases, we've involved the tribe earlier in areas that we know are sensitive. That's why we've already given the direction that this would be an above-ground park because of potential risk of excavation in the area. And just for your board's awareness, there's a lot of improvements that were planned in Austin Park that will never happen at this point because of sort of the difficulty navigating some of the sensitive tribal areas in the park. And so those projects, we just put off this one, we believe that we will be able to accomplish by pursuing an above ground project. So anyway, that will unfold through the design process. We'll begin consultation as the lead agency, fulfilling our obligations under state law. And anyway, I just hope that the board supports this project in something that I know Supervisor Spatier is particularly passionate about, improving what was the first skate park in Lake County, but is very run down and requires a tremendous amount of maintenance at this point. So with that, thank you.
No.
Okay. Is there any more comment in the chambers or on Zoom?
We do.
Okay.
Aaron McCarrick.
Hey, go ahead, Aaron.
Hello, thank you. This is Erin McCarrick, Clear Lake, and thank you, Supervisor Spatier, for taking this project on. I support this as long as it does meet all the requirements that the previous speakers have spoken about, and that there is a spirit of communication with the tribes and AB 52 throughout the entire process. I was also curious, this is funded by the Cannabis Discretionary Fund, and I'm wondering if there's a schedule of allotment for the remainder of the Cannabis Discretionary Funds beyond the $43,000, if this is like a planned multi-year investment from Supervisor Sabatier's year after year discretionary funds, or if they'll be used for other items.
So it's a little difficult to understand you. You had kind of I don't know, some sort of filter or something. But you asked about the discretionary funds, if it's multi-year. That part I can respond, but I think you also mentioned something about federal, and I didn't catch what that was. But to respond to the one that I...
Is that better?
Oh, so much better.
Yeah, I forgot when I have my headphones on, it can't hear me. Basically, in support of this project, as long as it abides by the requirements of the previous speakers and this open spirit of communication with the tribes and engaging them in the developments that happen on this area. But my question was, it looks like there's the request for proposals bid was $43,000, and cannabis allotment funds are $100,000 year after year. So I'm curious if there is, and again, putting these funds into the skate park is a great use of it because it is needed in Clear Lake. But I'm wondering if there is like a budget, if it's a continued budget, or if like the rest of it goes to construction materials, et cetera.
At this moment in time, I have not touched my discretionary funds as I've been working with the city council and city staff to bring this project to the Board of Supervisors. The intent right now is to pay the entirety of the design, which is the $43,500 that we have in front of us. Once we have the overall bid for the construction, then I plan to utilize the entirety of my discretionary funds that is left over. I am working to augment that through grants and other donations from local agencies, and I believe the city of Clear Lake has also identified some funding available to them to be able to add to that as well. It is not a budget at this moment for the idea that there is no construction costs that have been put together. Once the design is put together, at that point, there will be a budget for the entire project.
Yeah, thanks.
Now we have Holly Robertson.
Go ahead, Holly. State your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Holly Roberson. I'm Tribal Cultural Resources Council for the Khoi Nation of Northern California. Thank you for having us speak today. I want to thank Commissioner McCarrick and Supervisor Crandall for their openness to make sure that the city and the county consider tribal cultural resources, and also underscore what Chairperson Treppa and our TIPO Robert Geary said. The Khoi Nation is not against development in Lake County, but we are pro-sustainable, responsible, legally compliant development that is avoiding, preserving, and protecting significant tribal cultural resources. Here, it is very cost effective for the county and the city to involve tribes early in the process. Although, as Alan stated, tribal cultural resources consultation under AB 52 starts with the notice of, when there's a project on the line, it is extremely efficient to include the tribe's information and tribal cultural resources knowledge now at the RFP stage, because it can help you get bids to build the skate park that are consistent with this need that you have. If you don't include this knowledge and this issue in the RFP, you run the risk of having a change order, or later, which is more expensive, having delays in your process, or having people bid on the project who really frankly don't know what they're doing with regard to identifying and avoiding tribal cultural resources. The tribes in Lake County are extremely sophisticated, as Supervisor Moak Simon knows. We are able to help the city and county as collaborative partners in making sure that you address these issues properly. And this can really, again, save you time and money and reduce legal risk. We often get into consultation and then the response is, well, it's too late in the process. There's not enough money to do it. The plan's already in place. Let's just see what we can do, maybe with a little bit of mitigation. But if you involve us now, we can help you with avoidance. It's great that you're interested in development above ground. That doesn't necessarily mean there won't be tribal cultural resources impacts. So again, I just strongly encourage you to consider this. These are not minor tribal cultural resources. These village sites are recorded in the California Historic Resource Information Center. They're historical resources, they're cultural resources, their archaeological resources, and their significant tribal cultural resources. So you have significant legal risk here if you're not addressing these issues fully. And as I believe it was Supervisor Crandall said, we can help you plan to do this in a way that doesn't necessarily slow the project down a lot or cost a lot of extra money if you involve us now. I'm also submitting a comment online. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
No further hands on Zoom.
Okay. I will close public input and bring it back to the board. And Supervisor Green?
Yeah, just a quick question. I assume at some point this is going to spin into a project and some type of CEQA findings will be made by the city as the lead agency. So I do want to distinguish for the speakers between the county's consideration of this MOU today and whatever actions the city may take in consultation with our native partners. But has it been spun up as a project yet? Is there a use permit application? Has there been any CEQA work done on this project yet?
Absolutely none, since right now it's just a conception, and until there's a design, then there's nothing to analyze CEQA-wise, other than we know the location that we would like to make it happen in, but that's pretty much it. The design will provide us the details. Again, there will be open public town hall meetings, and I can assure the board that I will make sure to invite tribal to those meetings because it is public anyways, and then to have further conversations to make sure that we're not doing the change orders, to make sure that we're not hitting barriers. I want to see this project happen. I want to see it happen appropriately. And I think that until there's further information, it's really difficult to go through a process at this moment in time without seeing what are we looking at, what is the design at this moment in time.
Thank you for that clarification, and I concur with that. I definitely appreciate the interest in being involved early. That said, there's no requirement until there is a CEQA process to initiate that this consultation happen in a formal sense. I think you've heard ample examples of the willingness of the city and the sponsor of this measure to informally, in the earliest part of this project before ink even gets on paper regarding any proposed CEQA findings. So I'm finding that there is a good faith effort here to involve everyone in the community in the earliest part of this project. And based on the description so far, it sounds like it may even end up being, depending on what happens with the foundation and the repurposing of the former site of the current skate park, there could be a CEQA exemption in here if this project reaches a point where there'll be absolutely no land disturbance. The consultation may be as simple as that. As this project is scoped, there's no possibility of disturbing anything fresh because we're going to repurpose this. Or it may end up being a mild grading, and then we'll talk about the standard protocols that do apply. But I'm very comfortable moving forward with this. You do need a design of a project before you can advance a project forward for CEQA review. I'm confident, based on the statements here, that tribal consultation will be frequent and robust. And so I'm supportive of this measure. Thank you.
And just to add, I don't want to make any assumptions of what avenue the CEQA process might lead to us, but the CEQA process is a necessary part of the project in order to be able to move it forward appropriately. So I don't want to claim that it will be exempt or not until we have further information to better understand the situation.
Supervisor Simon?
Yeah. I appreciate the words both from the city and from the tribes here today on the comments. Obviously, it is a challenge. Each tribe has their own TIPO department, and as we move and deal with agencies, what I will give credit to is the county and the steps that we've taken over the last decade, at least here in Lake County, for collaboration and communication with the tribes. I spoke about it earlier today, the first organization, Lake County Risk Reduction Authority, adding them on, but ultimately in projects. In my area, for the Middletown area, there's been some large projects, developments at very sensitive areas, and we've been able to kind of mitigate those issues as the process has gone through. We are the same way as our tribe is we don't want to stop anything moving forward for Lake County, but we want to be a part of that and be at the table. And I think there's a way to do those things in communication with, you know, whether it's county or the cities. And it's how it's approached, I think. Like I said, you can make a statement of, I wouldn't want to slow anything down or stop anything, but I think there are some things that are asked for that may just exacerbate that and say it will stop things. So I agree with the early on education and constantly educating. I'm proud to sit here on the Board of Supervisors and bring any education opportunities I can to our departments or even developers as we're moving through that project. We know that having monitor agreements and other things are very important as you're moving through that, but documenting, you know, for the tribes is real important. We all have at least attempted to bring on a GIS so we can tell our story. You used to have to go to Sonoma State or to SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. No longer needed here in Lake County. We have really brought it in-house with our 7 nations. So in support of this today, I am in support of moving forward, but I will obviously be watching closely as it moves forward. I would like to see, you know, an amicable you know, agreement maybe come together for both the city and the tribes that are affected in that area. I will say it must be pretty close to being done because we just built a tribal health facility in that area, and that was able to get accomplished. And we want to make sure that we continue on those positive reins forward, ultimately supporting both the tribes and the city in this project. It's much needed, so hopefully we can do those things and have the meetings. It sounds like at least the conversations are happening. But sometimes actions are a little more than, you know, just saying one thing. It's actually doing some things because it does cost from understanding from the tribal standpoint of what we want to get accomplished as a nation to take care of our historical, you know, areas and everything, which we don't own, most of them. Our reses are not where we were for thousands of years. So once we're in partnership in those conversations is how we're moving together to get something done. I can only speak specifically for Middletown. There's been areas where we say, all right, it's so significant that we want to just be there to get it recorded and kind of negotiating that part on when the monitors are on site, what's happening, and really coming to an agreement that benefits everybody. Because the most important thing is, if something comes out of the ground, is making sure that it's documented. It happens all the time in construction jobs. A cat driver is not going, someone on a D9 is not going to know something popping out of the ground, what to look for. So that's the important part, I think, as we're moving forward. I know this is above ground, I may be going too in depth, but these are all the conversations that need to happen as we're moving forward. Because what we're attempting to do is kind of go back in history and say, all right, these are our lands. They were documented by non-tribal folks first, but now we're here. And we have the ability to do that. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this and supporting you in the city, Bruno, but also just making it very clear to be monitoring the situation and hopefully moving forward because we want to have it. If the city of Clear Lake, there are a lot of exciting projects there that they're attempting to do that's going to benefit all of our community members, including our tribal children that we're playing in leagues and other stuff that are going to be built down there. So we want to just make sure that communication is happening. So today I am going to support this MOU, but we'll hopefully be able to, you know, be a voice of reason if we get to, you know, any impasses as going out there. So that's kind of a long statement, but that's where I'm at right now. In understanding that I just want to give credit to the county and the way it's changed over my time as a leader, as on the tribal side, of being able to communicate with local landowners, developers, the county, you know, even the cities in communication. So there is some credit to be there, but it's still a constant education because I've said it here on this diocese. Anywhere you put a shovel in the ground, people have been here for 12,000 years. And understanding how important that it is, you know, just another educational tool. So, all right, that's what I have.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yeah, and so I'm looking on item B, where it says District 2 supervisors shall be involved in the process whenever it's possible. So I know that you'd stated that you'd be a part of it, and I know you said you'd be doing town halls and whatnot. And then on F, it says a presentation to the Board of Supervisors shall follow to present the proposed final design as well as the expenditures and inform the Board of Supervisors of the next step. I think that, I don't know when that would be. Of course, you would have to have the, you know, the design in place, but I think that's another good time that we could come together to ensure that, you know, hit the next steps or benchmarks to ensure that the tribe can be a part of the next process as well, because this, in essence, is the design phase, and as Supervisor stated, you're going to try to do it above ground and least possible to disturb the land. And I think the fact that was stated by Robert Gary was that to be involved right off the get, I think that's important. I know that with the project I was explaining earlier, it wasn't, but that's also during the time where we didn't have leadership in that department. So it didn't necessarily take place until we got it done, but that's the ideal, is just to have it right off the get. And I think we're on a good path right now to do that, to move forward. So, yeah.
So I think that even the design recognizes, or the preliminary design, how you're going to put it above ground, recognizes the impact that this project could have on such a important place. And I, you know, it's just my suggestion to have that involvement early and often, because, you know, that's one significant design element, but there could be more that could be helpful down the road. You don't know, rather than wait until the town halls to involve the tribes, because there could be something that they notice right away, right off the bat, that could save time and money and resources to have that early involvement. So I'm in favor of the MOU, but I just encourage that early participation to make sure that something significant isn't being missed. That's going to cost the project in the end.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I see that there is another hand in this Zoom session. Would you like to open up public?
Yes, I will.
Again, or is it being closed?
I'll just reopen public input for one more comment.
Okay, we have Dino Beltran from the Khoi Nation.
Okay, Dino, go ahead, state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, good morning. Thank you all. So there's some couple of things that were mentioned here in the last several minutes that are really important. First of all, town halls, I think that's a good idea. That's not consultation under AB 52.
No.
AB 52 would mean the tribes would have their own meetings, and that would be separate. Second of all, I'm glad that the Lake County Tribal Health Building was able to get completed, but it got stopped by the Khoi Nation because the process of an AB 52 consultation was not completed completely by the city of Clear Lake. We had to stop that project because they didn't do their full AB 52 and all the studies that were needed to be done. That's the fact. I think it was briefly mentioned earlier, there's a careless disregard by the city of Clear Lake to date with human remains. There was a project in Mullen back about 3 years ago. Archaeologists came out, there were human remains found. They had taken all the remains from that one trench, which is about 300 yards long. They took it to the airport site. They were supposed to guard those because human remains were known to be in them. Another developer took all those remains over to the avenues, and now those human remains have created another site. So, as much excitement as there may be for this project, and like Moak had stated, we also do not want to impede any projects, but things need to be done precisely. And a supervisor from the 2nd District is going to be involved. He should be adept in working with the tribes, AB 52, and we'll give a history lesson of what we've had to deal with in the city of Clear Lake. And it's not all pretty. So at this time, AB 52 is a big deal. And I also feel we've offered the city of Clear Lake consistent times training on AB 52. They keep not wanting to come to the table for training. I do not know why. So at this time, I would make training a part of this MOU, if this is to move forward. That's a simple request, and training needs to happen every time new people come on board, not only for the city of Clear Lake, but for the county of Lake. This is new to some people. You know, in the last 10 years, the improvement of communications from the county to the tribe has happened because of the MOU Ancestors One has had, and that has come because of Sherry Treppa, then chairman of Robinson, Mr. Crandall, and our chairman, Darren Beltran. That was negotiated for months and months. Goodwill was brought about because of the goodwill of all the tribes that were involved, and a successful agreement was come upon. But at this time, my suggestion highly for the AB 52 training, and let us work closely with Supervisor number 2, Mr. Sabatier, and thank you for your time. Training's a big deal.
Thank you. Any other public input? Okay, I'll close it again and bring it back to the board. Any other comments?
I think too that I know that like Moke had stated, there's a lot of history, that has been in place, but I think we're trying to, from here forward, get things in a better relationship. I know things get rocky. I've dealt with some situations in my town halls and in my district, but the more we keep sticking to it and having these discussions and talking about it, we can get to that point. I do appreciate Alan coming up and stating that he would be in compliance with that as well. So I think everyone's coming to that point where we know we have to do it, and so I think we're making strides, and sometimes they're not as fast as we want, but I think we can get there. So I just wanted to say that.
And I appreciate the comment from Mr. Beltran. Him and I have spoken, not specifically about this, but the topic was brought up. My plan is to make this happen and to make this happen correctly. The city's plan is to make this happen and make this happen correctly. We have laws that we have to follow, and we will. I will do my due diligence to ensure that the relationship and the process is completed appropriately. However, adding in an MOU to force another jurisdiction to do something, I'm not comfortable with. There are laws that already create the guidelines by which we all need to follow. But my goal is to complete the project, not see it create a circumstance that would disable the project. So I know Mr. Gary. Mr. Gary knows me, and him and I will have discussions about this project as well. And I will make sure that that there are no issues here. But adding it into the MOU, I'm not comfortable with, and I think that the laws state the guidelines of what we all need to follow. And so just wanted to make a comment on that. And if there's no further comment, I would like to approve the memorandum of understanding between the County of Lake and the City of Clear Lake for the design costs related to the regional skate park in District 2 for a total of for a total not to exceed $43,500.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Our next item is 6.6, our 1030 item, presentation of work plan for the Office of Climate Resiliency, the Administrative Office.
Yes, thank you, Board. Excuse me, thank you, Chair. It is my pleasure to introduce the county's first Chief Climate Resiliency Officer, Terry Logston, sorry, cold. As such, it's a new program and it's a new position, and I ask that she present to your board and the community what this actually entails as provided by the grant-funded position. Thank you, Terry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Let me make sure that since I'm sharing this via Zoom, it's not doing. Do you know how to switch the screen? I don't want that one showing because that's got my notes. I want to see the notes. I will do it the other way. Apologize. Old school.
For
some, it's still new school.
That's fine.
There it be.
Yeah, okay. Super, thank you, thank you. Again, my name is Terry Logston, and I am your new Chief Climate Resiliency Officer, and funded through the California Office of Emergency Services through a Prepare California Jumpstart Program grant. Apparently, there's going to be numerous CCRO positions throughout the state of California. It's my understanding that I was one of, if not the first, one of the first few hired and put in place throughout California. I understand there's at least 10 now. Soon there will be a cohort, and we'll get to meet and talk about it, and talk about the policies and procedures and the ideas, because each one is going to do something a little bit different that's tailored towards the needs of the county they represent. And so today I'm just going to go over the work plan from the grant application. And just to note that most of the photographs used in this presentation, I'm the photographer, a couple of them are not. But just kind of as a warning, there's going to be some, you're going to see some smoke columns, and there's no flames. But for those who are sensitive, I think because those images are really impactful for Lake County. So on this particular one, the very background, the orange, we all remember that orange day, September 9th, 2020. And then in the foreground is Middle Creek flooding off of Elk Mountain Road in 2012. And so the purpose of the grant is for me to serve as the missing link, a full-time staff dedicated to pulling together and effectively coordinating all local efforts to address and mitigate climate change conditions in Lake County, including working with the Risk Reduction Authority, the Office of Emergency Services, the Disaster Response and Recovery Unit, the Lake County Fire Safe Council, the Benefit Zone stakeholders of Buckingham and the Riviera, the Drought Task Force, the Comprehensive Drought Work Group, Tree Mortality Task Force, the Home Hardening Demonstration Initiative, and the North Shore Fire Fuels Crew, and the Soda Bay Corridor Evacuation Route Planning and Maintenance Project. And so that's just a number of the groups that I've already been participating in through the years. And so for me, I really look forward to being able to co-pollinate across all of those, the meetings and organizations. The top photo is the flooding in North Lakeport in 2017, and the bottom is from the Lake County Record B of the historic drought in 1977. You're looking at South Lakeport, kind of over or close from the Big Valley Rancheria into Lakeport, and you see how low the lake was. We dodged that one this year, so that's good. So let me go over the grant deliverables. This is a photo by Nathan DeHart, Cobb Mountain after the Valley Fire. So in the first 90 days, which began on December 5th, I'm tasked with collaborating with the cities of Clear Lake and Lakeport, tribal nations, county municipal advisory councils, and town halls to to introduce myself and raise awareness of the Office of Climate Resiliency, and to develop and then conduct initial community resilience surveys. And of course, starting in December and then meeting with the town halls and the municipal advisory councils is a little challenging because that's typically when everyone gets reseated. So that's going to probably be pushed out a little bit further than 90 days just because I'm not able to get on agendas. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And then to develop the survey, I've already gotten some initial questions. I had a meeting with Supervisor Sabatier, City Manager Alan Flora, and City Council Member Russ Kremer last week, and then I have reached out to the tribes, and I'll follow up with the tribal nations to understand what their major concerns are, and so to develop the survey. So far, most have mentioned evacuation routes, that we need to find out from the community if they know which route to take from their home. Do they have an alternate? Do you have your own transportation? And if you don't have your own transportation, do you have a plan to evacuate safely? Have you secured that? Defensible space, do you know what that is? Can you physically do the defensible space? Do you have someone who can help you? And how do you receive emergency information? So it's things like that that I'll be putting together and surveying. And then with the results from that survey, we'll work with these other groups to incorporate that into a plan of action. And so this was the Rocky Fire 2015 as seen from Clear Lake Oaks. I will also support the development and refinement of the Lake County Fire Safe Council, which I have been a participant in for many years. It's an ad hoc committee of the Board of Supervisors, facilitated by paid staff of the Lake County Resource Conservation District through funding from Title III funds through the Secure Rural Schools Act, which comes to the U.S. Forest Service. I will support the home hardening demonstration project led by North Coast Opportunities. NCO, you know, is the community action agency for Lake and Mendocino counties. And it's a grant-funded project, as you're aware. And it'll begin in the next month or so. NCO is finalizing the contracts for their contractors that they will work with. So that should be beginning shortly. And then, as I mentioned, with the results of the surveys, I'll analyze the results and work with partner agencies to help create action plans. This is a charred leaf that floated to my home in North Lakeport and landed on a squash plant from the Mendocino complex fire. So I've already reviewed. Part of it is I continue outreach through communities. And in the spirit of CMAT, if you recall, the Community Mitigation Assistance Team, which Lake County had the good fortune of being the first and so far the only county in the state of California to have this group come, and it's a nationwide group, and it's funded. They're mostly U.S. Forest Service partners, and they came and they worked with Lake County, and we met with them over the course of at least 2 weeks, and they put together a report that has a lot of good recommendations in it. And so when this grant was written, the intention is to use those recommendations from the CMAT, and in that same spirit, make recommendations for community resilience. And then to look for grants for all the partner agencies. It's not necessarily that I would write them all, but to help to work with the other agencies and the County of Lake to secure funding. So I've already reviewed, I scheduled an initial meeting and then a second meeting to discuss a Community Resource Center program grant through the CDFA with representatives from the county, cities of Lakeport and Clear Lake, NCO. It was actually the Lake County Fair who brought it to our attention, and they work with California Construction Authority, Lucerne Alpine Senior Center, and American Red Cross, and we met looked at the grant for a couple. We just couldn't make the turnaround because it's due within a month. So, you know, and that's, well, you know, we need grant writers. I also submitted an intent to apply for a climate adaptation planning grant through the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and attended a grant webinar. That particular grant is due March 31st. And so I'll be meeting with some department heads to see what's the best use of that funds. We would be at the first stage, and I think, or the first phase, they have it set out in 3 different phases of needs. And I think that we would be very competitive for those funds. And then I talked to Chief Mike Ciancio, and I'll set up a meeting after he makes a presentation to your board about the status of the North Shore Fire Fuels Crew project and how I can support him. And that's a view of the river fire from portion of the Mendocino complex as seen from Cobb, where I was evacuated to. So continue to support the implementation of the updated CWPP, or Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which hopefully will be before your board and approved in the next couple months. Develop and publicly present a comprehensive report of everything that I've been working on. And then adjust for future needs and just action plans based on the survey and continuing and ongoing feedback. And that runs through this is year 1, and it runs through December of this year. And then in years 2 through 5, the photo on the left is, which fire was that? That was that was still the Rocky Fire, and that's from Clear Lake Oaks, and that's where I learned the term capping out, when you get a pyrocumulonimbus that goes up so high that ice forms and collapses. Things that you learn in a fire-adapted or community. So years 2 through 5, I'll build on the work of the first year, continue doing surveys, continue reaching out to the municipal advisory councils and town halls. But I also reached out to the Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative. And they created what you see on the right that's called the Pillars of Resistance. And they have 10 pillars that they worked with interested parties and community members to identify. It included the Forest Service, the California Tahoe Conservancy, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, Nature Conservancy. There was about 12 of them. And they worked on to accelerate restoration of forest and watershed resilience. And so I asked them for permission to utilize this. And I'm working with a graphic designer that is in-house here in the county, and I'm going to go out and get feedback on them to make these more reflective of Lake County. But I like the idea because everything is interconnected, and we need to look at each of these sections. And so as I work with partner organizations, for instance, economic diversity. Well, we don't have a timber industry here in Lake County anymore. We used to, so that one will be changed. And so I've gotten feedback that will be incorporated in this, and I'll use that as the framework for the office and for the next few years. And then as I continue to seek funding to have this position in the office be ongoing. What I've really liked about this and finding out about their partners for TCSIs, because it reminded me of the 2 groups that we have working together in Lake County. The first one is the Blue Ribbon Committee for the Rehabilitation of Clear Lake, which I know that your board is aware of. And it is a collaborative group that's working to address an issue that was funded by AB 707, but it includes all 7 federally recognized Native Sovereign Nations, the Central Valley Control Board, UC Davis, the County of Lake County Economic Development Corporation to represent local economic development, the Farm Bureau for Ag, the Resource Conservation District for Environment, and Lake County Special Districts representing all public water suppliers. And they have 2 subcommittees, a technical subcommittee and the socioeconomic subcommittee. And I hope to work with the socioeconomic subcommittee primarily in working on the pillars of resilience. And then the other collaboration, which I mentioned earlier, was CMAT, the Community Mitigation Assistance Team, and of course the Risk Reduction Authority. The two entities in Lake County, as I mentioned, that are closest to the TSCI collaborative are the Blue Ribbon Committee and the Risk Reduction Authority. And the Risk Reduction Authority includes seated directors from fire protection districts, the county, both cities, most of the local tribal governments, and public water purveyors. And one of the things that we found out going through the CMAT process was that, there's a lot of responsibility placed on the RRA, the Risk Reduction Authority. And it needs to delegate some of the work to other partners, but it needs the other partners to be able to delegate to. They need to have so we're continuing looking for funding because it's such an amazing collaborative that we have. The Blue Ribbon Committee is funded. The Risk Reduction Authority needs additional funding. And so that's, basically it. I'm not a climate expert. I'm not a climate scientist. I have been studying my former position as an environmental director for our tribe. I learned a lot about the current data, the current thinking of what's going on particularly in Lake County and in Northern California. As you know, though, Lake County is unique. We're a little isolated from everywhere, and we don't have data necessarily specific to Lake County, but we know the trends. We know that we're going to see extreme heat events. We know that we're going to have flooding and drought cycles. We know that we're going to have atmospheric rivers that bring, like in 2012, that one photo, we had 6 inches of rain in one day, which never happens, but it did. All the creeks rose and we had flooding, but then it didn't rain again for months. So we're going to go through these cycles, and so what I'm going to look for and what I will be as a resource for county departments and to partner agencies around Lake County is to pull them together to come up with solutions. Thank you.
Well, it's so exciting to have you here and to have this position be one of the first in the state. And I know I was excited for you to come on board. I know a lot of people were, and to have the work outlined before us kind of helps us understand what you can and can't do under this grant. And so every conversation that I have with you is, does this fall within the grant parameters? And that's something that all of us need to recognize going forward because it's very specific.
Yeah.
And I love that you use you're the missing link because it is what we have needed. We needed the connectivity within the county government and within the administrative office. So I'm just going to open it up to, Supervisor Sabatier.
Surprise. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of things that I would like to better understand. So there's some things that you listed on there that seems to be some of the same things the RRA is already doing. Like I think the Best Fits grants is something that you kind of described as well, that you would be looking for grants and seeing who should be the ones to go for those grants. Is that going to be a replacement, a complement to, or how would that work? Because I just want to make sure we're not duplicating work that's already being done. So kind of trying to better understand the overlap between your work, what the RRA is doing. I'm assuming that you're going to be taking part in the RRA functions of their meetings since it has a lot of information and a lot of activities that relate to what your grant position it requests to do. So just kind of getting a better understanding how that relationship is, and are you going to be taking some pieces away from them or complementing what they've already been doing?
That's a great question. The Best Fits subcommittee of the Risk Reduction Authority doesn't at this moment exist because of funding challenges. NCO was providing services, and I'm not 100% sure on the background of that, but they won't be. The spreadsheet is still live, meaning it's a shared spreadsheet of all the participants can go in and look. So what's helpful with just that document to have been created is now you can put reminders to go look at that agency for funding. Also, the Westside Sacramento Integrated Regional Water Management Plan is facilitated by the Yolo County RCD, and they also send a grant spreadsheet, and they update once a month. So that's not work that I will be doing like for the RRA, but I have those two resources just that are that other people are doing. So
sounds like it would be complementary to what's already occurring then. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's not occurring, no. There's,
Yeah, the best fits is not occurring. Yeah.
the spreadsheet is there, but there are no meetings and there's no work occurring there.
Okay. Then, just on an add-on, I want to make sure, and I apologize if the conversation has already occurred, I don't know, but CSAC did start a program where they will help us with grant writing, and I would suspect that this type of grant that we would be looking for is exactly what CSAC might be eligible to help us with. I've never seen a finite description of, no, we won't help you with that, yes, we'll help you with that, but I would definitely say, let's look into that. That way they can complement the work you can get accomplished, so you don't have to sit there and just do grant writing after grant writing after grant writing. They're going to be there to support the cause, and I think that that would be an amazing way to utilize their service. Because yes, grant funding is what's going to help us accomplish these goals. We do not have the bank account to be able to afford these types of projects, or many of these types of projects. So just wanted to alert you to that, just in case that wasn't known. I know in the grant it does talk about specific census tracts, mainly the Clear Lake Oaks and the Clear Lake area, Spring Valley included. When you and I talked, which is why you and I talked, because of the fact that that was in the grant, there was the idea of expanding that to the entire county. Is that a plan to do an amendment to the grant and get that approved by the state, or is that already approved by the state to be able to expand? I mean, I love it. Lake County as a whole needs the help. Love the fact that those census tracts were chosen. I appreciate that. But just wanted to make sure that there was approvals or a process to get those approvals to make those changes.
Yeah, great question. It actually is in the grant that way. The initial focus was to start there with, and I had the opportunity to speak with former CAO Hutchinson, who, you know, wrote the grant to get a little clarification. The idea and the case that she made to Cal OES was the incidence of fire that has happened in those two census tracts, which were based on census tracts from 2010, so they no longer exist. But that's what they used. You know, that's the mapping that they used, which, as you mentioned, it includes all of your supervisorial district, but in the narrative would also include Clear Lake Oaks and Spring Valley. And so with the intention that at the time the grant was written, those were the locations that had the most recent fires. And the issues that you have in any area of Lake County are similar when it comes to evacuation, ingress, egress, notification alerts, but some of them they're just slightly different. So it's I'm going to focus on those areas first, but extrapolate that and, you know, to all of Lake County. And that can be done after the first 90 days.
Okay. Appreciate your presentation, the conversation that we had also, and looking forward to seeing the projects that you bring, because in my mind, your position and your goal is to obtain grant funding, obviously understand the projects that are needed, but it's also to manage those projects to ensure that they come to fruition, are successful, so that we can benefit entirely from the work that you're doing. So I'm looking forward to you bringing us those projects.
Thank you. It's just one point of clarification. It's not necessarily that I will bring the grants, but I will pull partners together. Like, for instance, the CDFA funding that we were looking at, with the fairgrounds being the anchor, through the two conversations we had, we decided what we need to do is have a forum to bring all the senior centers together to have the conversation about developing the idea of a community resilience center, because we know, particularly after going through last summer, the extended heat waves and the housing stock that we have in Lake County in many areas, it doesn't have adequate insulation. They don't have adequate cooling. They don't have air conditioning or evaporative cooling adequate, particularly if there's a fire at the same time. And so the state in many areas, in many grant fundings, wants to see local government set up and operate cooling centers during the summer and warming centers during the winter, not necessarily for people who are unhoused, but for people who don't live in adequate housing.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Simon?
Excited to have you on board, Terry, and filling this position. I'll just follow up on the discussions on countywide. You know, when the Jumpstart program first came out, correct, we had the initial conversations with Callaway, or can we apply for this? Because it was just in the one designated area. They did come back and say, yeah, you can make this all county, because we want to make sure it was benefiting everybody that was affected by the fires. So I think if there needs to be any modifications, we can do that. But the reason we applied for the entire you know, program was because they said, yes, for Lake County, we're going to allow you guys to kind of open it up. So we appreciated that kind of bend for us, and, you know, that's what created it. Supervisor Sabatier brought it up too, the new CSAC grant writing program. I don't know how that works, but I really am excited about having you to kind of focus and make that gap and say, hey, listen, my board this is what Lake County wants to do, and this is how we're going to move forward. So I don't know if it needs to be an official request from the board, but if that comes to this, please, you know, bring it to us. And okay, says no, so excellent. Just make sure that they know that we have someone in place to help move those things forward is so important. So I'm excited to see that you'll be going out to all the, you know, the advisory committee or advisory councils for the board. And you're right, everybody's just getting reseated right now. We just had elections, so that'll be great as we move forward. It kind of has been the missing cog. How do we communicate with everybody doing the work that's being done? So excited to have you here to be kind of that, you know, that final cog in the wheel to continue moving forward. We got 5 years of work to do, and being resilient is always something that Lake County's good at, but really focusing on those dollars to continue to bring those things in. I think some of the pilot programs we have started here are going to be phenomenal. The home hardening programs for Lake County, the entire county, once we're over the first initial steps, but also the ingress and egress. And there's a lot of different issues that we need to be dealing with. Obviously, one we're going to talk about later on today, you know, getting our creeks cleared out from gravel, from overgrowth, for some other stuff. Those are all resiliency conversation that we need to have down the road to make sure that the waters that are going to flow are unimpeded, and gives us opportunities to continue that. So I think, you know, there's some great conversations that are going to be happening. So I'm excited about it, but I think getting that CSAC grant writer support is going to be huge for us moving forward. There's one grant, obviously, I know we've been talking about the Risk Reduction Authority, the FEMA BRIC grant, Building Resilience in Communities. We haven't gone for that one yet, but I think we're getting close to be able, some agency in Lake County, if not the county, being able to move forward with that. So we're moving in the right direction. So appreciate it, and here to support as much as possible. And like I said, communication is the number one thing. So
Thank you.
thank you.
And one of the examples that we really need is to continue to look for that grant or those grants that will help us develop our climate action plan, which obviously is not a grant or a project that you're going to carry, but you're going to support our other departments and making sure that we can have that critical work done.
Exactly.
Okay, so I don't see any, Supervisor Green?
Yeah, just a real quick question / comment. And I guess resilience and sustainability could be interchangeable, but I don't know if that's entirely accurate in this context. But on the sustainability stuff, if you take a look at all these bullet points, a lot of them involve land use and water use. And it's not probably within the four corners of your grant to talk about, but there may be things in our general plan, our land use element, water use and stuff like that, that deserves a fresh look. So it can't be all grants all the time. There may be some fundamental policies that the county has that we need to look inward and kind of kick the tires on some of our old assumptions in the general plan and maybe update it. You mentioned the forest resilience may need to get changed out. It's like, no, we actually have forests. I wanted to mention native oak woodlands and chaparral as being so critical to our county, and sustainability would certainly involve having a better understanding of what we can do to sustain those woodland communities against fire risk, development pressure, what have you. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot, because again, I don't know the four corners of the grant, but I do see opportunity as your job unfolds. to maybe find spots in our general plan and our land use policies, our water use policies that need improvement. Our shoreline ordinance would be one example. There'll be other examples that may be discussed this afternoon. So again, you're just one person and you're going to be working super hard, and a lot of that is focused on grants and stuff like that. But I just hope the grant will allow you and others in the county to consider more systemic changes if they're needed, like at the general plan level, for example. And that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think that it does in some, like specifically, it says to assist in the hazardous mitigation plan update. And so one thing that I have worked with OES just already is for each of the climate categories in the HMP draft is to tie it to projected climate impacts that we know or believe are going to happen in Lake County. And so how that is tied with each of those areas. So I've already made those suggestions and will continue as they go through the process. So I anticipate when the CDD department, undergoes a planning process, typically you're pulling together some group of citizens or the public to talk about things or to review things to get updates. I will be involved. So thank you.
Yeah. And it was the timber industry. We have the forest lands, but it's the timber industry under economic development. But that's an opportunity for biomass and trying to figure out how we manage all of that material.
All of that. Yes.
Okay, so I will open it up for public comment. Anyone in the chambers or on Zoom?
Todd Metcalf has a hand up.
Okay. Director Metcalf.
And the host won't. The host has prohibited me from showing myself for some reason, which is probably a good thing. But Terry, welcome. I just want to say I appreciate what Supervisor Green said about we need to look inward. Terry, I don't know if you're aware of this or not. I'm with Behavioral Health Services, and in the past, when we've had heat waves and cold snaps, we've opened up some of our facilities as a warming and cooling facility. And if you stay tuned into the Board of Supervisors meeting today, I don't know when the heck it's going to be heard, but we're actually bringing something to the board about opening a warming shelter. So I just want to let you know that I would like to work with you in the future in these types of activities and operations. Oh, there we go. I do actually exist. So I just wanted to let you know who I am and kind of what we do, and that we have been actively involved in disaster and emergency operations. Before I came to behavioral services, I worked at social services, so I'm very, very familiar with the needs of our community, and just kind of wanted to just throw it out there that I'm here to assist and help, and we do need to collaborate. Here at Behavioral Services, we serve, obviously a very vulnerable population, and so when disaster strikes, we do whatever we can to help those folks. So just wanted to welcome you. We're very excited about this, appreciate the presentation, and I'm sure you'll know where to find me.
Thank you. I look forward to setting up a meeting to talk. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Terry.
Okay, do we have anybody else? Anyone in the Zoom?
No other hands on Zoom.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for any final comments, but this is a no action item.
Just a final question. You said in December we'll be getting a further presentation?
Yeah, every year you'll get an annual presentation on the work, the recommendations, if there's any plans that the partner agencies, and where they are that I can report on their behalf. Every year you'll get a report.
So basically your year is July to June, but then you'll coordinate all of the information of everything you've done and then present to us at a later time?
Yes.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and there's very strict reporting requirements with the grant.
There are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry. So we have two items 6.7 and 6.8 before our 1 o'clock timed items. So I'm just looking at all of you to figure out, do we want to do these 2 items before lunch or push them to after lunch?
I am willing to move forward, especially in light that Director Turner has been sitting there very patiently.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I agree, but I am going to need a very short break. So if we can make this like 5 minutes at the max, then we can move on. Okay, great, thanks.
Just got connected to PEG TV. Their meetings start at 6 p.m., so if we happen to have a Tuesday meeting at the same day, we're going to have to limit ourselves, or else we're taking over their public meeting.
Oh. Okay, We are back for our 6.7 item, 11 a.m., public hearing, consideration of draft ordinance amending Chapter 21, Article 58 and Article 68 of the Lake County zoning ordinance relating to appeals. Director Turner.
Thank you. Mireya Turner, Community Development Director. The item you have before you now stemmed from a resolution of intent that was adopted by the board on September 22nd of last year. This item was brought to the board by Supervisor Sabatier, and the purpose of this ordinance is to amend the zoning code to require written documents pertaining to appeal hearings be submitted no later than 96 hours ahead of that hearing in order to be considered in a timely manner by the deciding body, which could either be the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. This would require 3 amendments to the code, an amendment on each of the process sections for the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, and then the addition of a definition of I think it's documentary evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's clear what that means in that aspect. Let's see. The draft ordinance was reviewed by the Planning Commission and received their full support for a recommendation of approval prior to returning to you today. I think that I messed up on the motion, so I will defer to County Council to correct me on that one. But that concludes my report.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I just want to add, this doesn't prohibit people from submitting anything after the 96 hours. It's just, it doesn't, we have the choice as a body to continue with the hearing or decide, versus before it almost felt like we had to pause because of the fact that there was no timelines or guidelines on submissions of items, because obviously we have the verbal public comment as well as anything else. So just wanted to make sure that we're not prohibiting speech here. We're just asking to work with us so that we can get the majority of the documentation at a timely fashion.
Additionally, one point that was brought up during that Board of Supervisors meeting was a concern for lack of public input. And it was noted at that time that the significant amount of written documentation comes usually from the appellant, who would have had the full at least 10-day notice of the upcoming appeal date.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, thank you. The plain language of the ordinance appears to suggest that tardy public input, if it was not prohibited, at least in the case of the Planning Commission, they would be prohibited from considering any late submitted evidence. Also, while perhaps the bulk of the written material may come from an appellant, it really depends on the way the appeal is structured. If it's an appeal of a denial, that's one thing. If it's an appeal of a project that's been approved, that's quite another thing. And the people submitting comments would not, in some cases, be an applicant who has a 10-day notice. Also, if they're members of the public that do want to submit argument, they have to do it 96 hours in advance. The agenda for the meeting itself is only posted 72 hours in advance. So these are quasi-judicial proceedings. Due process suggests that everyone gets a fair shake and gets to make whatever comments they want to in support or against the appeal. And notwithstanding, you know, I get it. Late arriving evidence is no fun for anybody, but it happens. And to give a full and complete appeal hearing, I think you need to give people not a 4-day cutoff deadline, especially when the agenda has a 3-day cutoff deadline for posting. So if an appeal hearing is going to happen, everyone should have full notice that it is happening, should have full opportunity to provide comments timely. A shorter limitation, 24 hours, something like that, would be one thing, but a 96-hour limitation seems to me a little bit over the top.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I'd like to ask Ms. Grant, the way that this is written does not prohibit submissions within 24 hours. This is documentary evidence, not public comment, correct?
Yes, it won't prevent public comment, but when you're talking about written materials, it might be a good idea to clarify that. I believe what you're actually talking about here are parties to the appeal, which is to avoid 30-page briefs from attorneys for an applicant or an appellant at the 11th hour, which necessitates either a cursory review by your board or continuing the matter as you had stated. So, it may be possible just simply to state any party to the appeal.
And can we change that maybe in the definitions?
Yes, I'm not sure.
Says any document which is offered and admitted as evidence during an administrative appeal, planning commission appeal, or a board of supervisors appeal as provided in Article 58 of Chapter 21 of the Lake County zoning ordinance. Can we say any document which is offered and admitted as evidence by the appellant or applicant or whatever the...
By a party to the appeal, yeah. I think you can make those changes. It's not to circumvent the public's right to comment, and the public would certainly be allowed to comment in writing. Of course, not all of that's going to rise to the level of evidence either, but just to ensure clarity by stating party to the appeal, then it would, I think, address what you're looking to address, which is to prevent the last-minute submission by lawyers. We tend to do that, and it does make it difficult oftentimes for your board to address a matter with efficiency because oftentimes the documentation is quite voluminous.
Thank you. And I'd be interested in making that final amendment just to clarify the specific parties to which we're discussing about.
Supervisor Green?
Could it be amending the definition of documentary evidence? That may be the easiest way to do it. Appellant's documentary evidence or something like that. So any document offered and admitted as evidence by an appellant during an administrative appeal, planning commission appeal, or board of supervisors appeal. Would that be clarification?
Well, I wouldn't limit it just to the appellant because the department may also want to submit evidence, and you're talking about due process and fairness. You'd want the same rule to apply to the submission of evidence when you sit in a quasi-judicial capacity. But there is, when you're talking 72 hours and 96 hours, that does present somewhat of a disconnect, as you know.
And the whole reason is to make sure that those documents are within the, I'm sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
The whole reason is to make sure that the documentary evidence is in the agenda so the public as well as the Board of Supervisors can come prepared to a meeting rather than being surprised with a 100-page packet that we've received numerous times in the past in the morning when we approached the dais. So.
Right, I think you said the purpose was to ensure that the packet was complete at the time that it's made public.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
One additional point of consideration, if I may. The agenda, which would include the packet that would be made public, can be posted no later than 72 hours prior to the meeting. While we do try to get materials out to the Planning Commission and board as soon as we can, we sometimes need to rely on that 72-hour deadline. So if the department was required to hold to that 96-hour timeline, that could create a little bit of difficulty. It might not. We might be able to pull it off, but it's just we'd have to keep in mind that we have two separate deadlines. One is Brown Act. One is the additional hours to get the board or the Planning Commission any required documentation.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item? Chambers or in Zoom?
Nothing in Zoom.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the ordinance amending Chapter 21, Article 58, and Article 68 of the Lake County zoning ordinance relating to appeals with the amendments as suggested by County Council.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh,
Can council restate the amendments?
Yes, I can. Just a moment. Also, I would say that the motion in this case is going to be the motion to waive reading of the ordinance, have it read in title only, waive reading of the ordinance as amended, and I'll recite the amendments in just a moment. And then you'll have a separate motion to advance for second reading 5 days hence, or in this case, to February 7th.
so we'll rescind that motion?
I make the motion, and then you'll tell us what the amendment is?
You can make the motion, and I can tell you what the, yeah, and I do understand the 96 hours, but again, it's unlikely that even the Planning Commission or the board will see the documentation before the 72 hours. So 96 may be difficult for all parties necessarily. But anyway, moving forward with this, it would be any party to the appeal wishing to provide documentary evidence and/or written argument shall submit such documentation to the Secretary of Planning Commission no later than 96 hours prior to the date at the time of the public hearing. Documentary evidence and/or written argument submitted after that time shall not be considered by the Planning Commission. That's an amendment to Section 58.17 of Chapter 21, the Lake County zoning ordinance. And 58.27 shall be amended to read, submission of documentary evidence and/or written argument. Any party to the appeal wishing to provide documentary evidence and/or written argument shall submit such documentation to the Secretary of the Planning Commission no later than 96 hours prior to the date at the time of the public hearing. Documentary evidence and/or written argument submitted after that time shall not be considered by the Planning Commission. And then under definitions, D, which shows in Section 3 of the ordinance, documentary evidence number 10, any document which is offered by a party to an appeal and is admitted into evidence during, any document submitted by, any document which is offered and admitted as evidence during an administrative appeal, Planning Commission appeal, or Board of Supervisors appeal by a party thereto, as provided in Article 58 of Chapter 21 of the Lake County zoning ordinance.
Thank you for that.
Oh, are you rescinding your motion, or are you amending it? Or
I'm going to amend it. Ms. Grant, if you can help me out. The waiving of the reading, read it by title only.
Motion to waive reading of the ordinance as amended and have it read in title only.
And have it read in title. So I move to waive the reading of the ordinance as amended and read it by title only.
Second.
we got a motion?
I think we're good.
Just point of order then, are you amending the 96 hours or leaving it as is?
Leaving it as is.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No?
Okay, motion passes.
And then I move to advance the second.
I gotta read it.
Oh, right.
So sorry.
Okay, it's an ordinance amending Chapter 21, Article 58, and Chapter 21, Article 68 of the Lake County zoning ordinance pertaining to appeals. All right.
Thank you. And then I move to advance the second reading to February 7th.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we will move on to the next item. Item 6.8, our 11:30 a.m. public hearing, consideration of draft ordinance amending Chapter 5, Section 2 of the Lake County Code, setting forth procedures for expediting permit processing for electric vehicle charging stations as required by Government Code Section 65850.7, AB 1236, 2015, to Department of Community Development. Director Turner.
Thank you. Mireya Turner, Community Development Director. I also have with me Sarah Whitman, our Staff Services Analyst. I wanted to make sure that she was here because she did help me out with the bulk of the preparation of this item. However, she doesn't really want to talk to you, so I'll... Anyway, but if I could just take a moment to just express my appreciation to the staff that we have in the Community Development Department. I'm supposed to learn delegation as a director, so I survive, and I've been extremely thankful that as I reach out and ask different members of our staff to take on certain tasks, we have a wonderfully able body of staff resources upstairs. So I continue to be impressed and thankful by all the assistance that they offer. Sarah is one glowing example of that. What you have before you this morning, or no, today, is the last few items required for the county to come into compliance with AB 1236, which was approved in the state in 2015. And the purpose of it is to streamline the processes of electric vehicle permit applications. So there are a number of ways that jurisdictions were supposed to do this by this act. And what I say were because there continue to be additional laws coming from the state regarding the streamlining of this permit process. But for this one, for AB 1236, it was the adoption of an ordinance, the creation of an objective checklist, the electronic submittal option for applications, and an expedited processing of the plans. We have already been doing two of those three, the expedited processing of the plans and allowing them to be submitted to us electronically. So we've also been using our existing checklist to meet the needs of the electronic vehicle charging station permit applications. And so today, what we're bringing before you today is the checklist, the separate checklist that we were required to produce, as well as the ordinance before you today. But just to make sure the board is clear, we have for quite some time been expediting the processing of these permits. Because this is an internal process amendment and not something specific to land use, this did not go before the Planning Commission for their consideration. I just brought it straight to the board for your consideration. That concludes my report, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to all of your staff. Comments from the board? Yes, Supervisor Sabatier?
Next time our board goes to an RCRC meeting, we will now be on that map of people who have done it, and we will all feel better about it.
That's what I was going to say, so we're good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, any other,
Just one quick question. You said, how many permits do we have? Do you have any idea who's been putting these up? Just to think Caltrans, a few other places I know of, but just a question.
Our chief building official, when I touched base with him on this, said we generally get about 1 to 2 a year. So it's not very many. It's very few at this time. They hope that it will increase. You know, that's part of why this was all put in place by the state, is my understanding. But we have 1 or 2 a year, and it takes generally a week or less to process those. As long as the applicant has all their documentation, it moves very quickly.
That's good to know, because we do want to encourage that as we're going. More and more vehicles coming into Lake County, so I know businesses and other opportunities are looking at that, so.
Absolutely, and the checklist will be available both in hard copy at the counter as well as electronically on our website.
I see we have Doug Gerhardt from Air Quality. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. I was just going to mention, since I was kind of disappointed to hear we only get 1 to 2 a year, which is kind of shocking with the electric vehicle infrastructure issues and things in California. But we are working on grants to be able to help with the infrastructure to install EV charging stations. So hopefully within the next 6 months or so, as soon as we have a little better staffing, we will be pursuing that and making it available for people to apply for those grants. And it doesn't cover the charging station itself, but it helps with the infrastructure that is needed to install the charging station. So we may be able to incentivize getting more charging stations into Lake County and increasing that accessibility for the EV transition that's coming.
Great.
If I might also add to what Doug just let you know. A couple weeks ago, I was getting my car serviced locally and was talking about replacing my 2006 vehicle with an electric vehicle in the future. And he said that to date, there has been no requirement that the electric vehicle manufacturers share the maintenance and repair technology with our local car service places. So I know that doesn't have anything to do with this, so I'll keep that really brief. But you might want to keep that as you're thinking about advocacy for Lake County at the state level. That might be a good thing, is to lend our voice to increase the pressure for those manufacturers to share that technology, so that I don't have to go to Santa Rosa to get an electric vehicle serviced. I can stay local.
It's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. I will open up for public comment in the chambers or in the Zoom room. Is there anybody in Zoom?
I don't see any.
Okay, then I'll bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, before I make the motion, I'll just add that as similar to the Golden State Connect, when we jump through specific hoops, this is basically the same thing that with the map. There's a Golden State Finance has a zero emissions vehicles initiative, and this will put us in line to be a part of when they're starting to look out for funding, just like Mr. Gerhardt said, we would be eligible for that also through them. So, yeah. I will go ahead and motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance. No?
No, it'll be a motion to waive reading of the ordinance and have it read in title only.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, and then it's an ordinance amending Chapter 5, Section 2, setting forth procedures for expediting permit processing for electric vehicle charging systems, and then electric vehicle charging station permit expediting ordinance. In parentheses, that thing.
Madam Chair, if I may, the second motion will be a motion to advance the second reading of the ordinance to February 7th.
So moved.
And second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And it is now, yes? Were you going to say something?
I was going to ask you a question, but I think you're already looking at that.
We're going to eat.
I just want to make, there seems to be a lot of people showing up for the
Yes.
1:30 p.m. I'm wondering if Supervisor Green minds moving the 1 p.m. to after that to appropriately respect the time of those showing up for 1:30.
There was a request to present. There was a slide deck. I don't think it's going to take much longer than 15 minutes. It was kind of, I put it that way as a warm-up act. Feel-good warm-up act. If I can reach out over lunch, yeah. I'm open to it, but if I can reach out to the sponsor of this, I would appreciate that. And if we have to, for example, if we do a 30-minute lunch, come back at 1:15, I'm pretty confident we'll be able to bang it out. But let me reach out and confirm that, if that'd be okay. What did I say?
I think we're going to take an hour lunch.
You were thinking an hour?
Yes, because we're going to be here for a long time, and I think everybody needs a break. So we will come back from lunch at 1:45.
Okay. 1:45 is when we come back.
1:45.